We're all set? Does that mean it's recording? I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's recording according to this.
Very good. All right. This is the Planning Commission meeting to be held on Tuesday, February 11th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Would you please call the roll?
Mayor Knightsky,
Present.
Alderperson Kastner,
Present.
Denise Collins, Steve Rogers, Brian Weiss, Christine Helene,
Present.
Bob Krentz,
Here.
Michael Braswell.
Present.
Just quickly under discussion, because Mr. Carlson is out and excused, Mr. Krentz is a voting member, the alternate voting member tonight. Mr. Braswell is an alternate, can engage in discussion, but cannot vote. Okay. I'd entertain a motion under item 2 for the approval of the January 14th, 2020 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Helene. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Commissioner Kastner. Commissioner Rogers wasn't here. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is a signage plan appeal for Tender Care Collision and existing business located at 4420A South. Did I miss one? Oh, sorry. Item 3, discussion regarding last common council meeting.
We had public hearings for Illuminati's and the Verizon antenna at the YMCA. Both were approved by the Common Council.
Any idea when Illuminati is going to open up?
They haven't started doing anything in there yet. It's still got. Hope soon. We don't know.
No, they have not pulled permits yet.
So as long as I got you here. Dunkin' Donuts, do we know?
We issued permits for Dunkin' Donuts.
Starbucks progress.
They're still in the process of submitting plans for review. Engineering's requested some additional civil plans from them, so they're going back and forth with the contractor on that.
Which is the other one, the car wash next to Meyer? So I get asked these questions every day. The car wash next to Meyer?
I haven't heard from them again in a little while.
All right, thank you. Okay, item 4, the signage plan appeal for tender car collision, existing business located at 4420A South 108th Street.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So as we know, the sign code currently allows for just one wall sign. They're proposing to put, they already have an additional wall sign up that matches the one along Highway 100. The second sign is facing south. It's in the parking lot.
Make a motion
It's
to
already up.
approve the
I'll
waiver
second
as
that.
presented, second by
How much window signage are they allowed?
25%.
Yeah.
Yes.
You would think if they're asking for a extension on signage on the building, they would keep their temporary signage in the window a little bit at bay.
I'll say at a minimum,
Yeah.
seem reasonable.
Just warn them that
We can
that's,
Remind
talk to them about that.
remind them that the code is 25% of
That's fine.
existing.
I think it's past.
Okay, motion was made by me, second by Commissioner Rogers. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 5A, special use permit for proposed limited service restaurant bar venue with Lightspeed and existing business located at 4251 South 27th Street, along with a site plan review for the proposed limited service restaurant bar venue. I might have said review, I meant venue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Lightspeed venue is proposing to add food and drink options to their operation, which puts them under a bar and restaurant category. The modified floor plan is highlighted as follows here. They would add a kitchen and a bar area and some seating. They do have, it's zoned, the site is zoned C2, which permits limited service restaurants and taverns as a special use. A public hearing would be required as early as March 17th. They're proposed also changing the hours of operation. So Monday through Thursday, they would extend the night hours by 2 hours to 11 p.m. Friday, they're proposing to be open till midnight, Saturday till midnight, and Sunday for change would be closing at 8 p.m., now proposing to close at 10 p.m. You see the aerial photo here. There are 97 parking spaces required. This takes into account the entertainment use as it is today, and also the restaurant, small restaurant bar area. And there are 74 parking spaces provided on site, of which 22 of those seem to be dedicated, possibly to Brager Ford. In the back area, there is a sign for employee parking only, which I'll get to in a little bit. Condition of approval, staff did ask, take a look at the property line, the yellow border here. There is zero access to the back of the site from 27th Street. So everyone uses the drive to the north, but that actually belongs to this large parcel here. It's kind of a flag parcel with a driveway that goes to the back, which is owned by Brager Ford. So as a condition, we are asking that the owner, Mr. Maddock, does supply an easement agreement between those two parcels, just for our file. And then, again, we'll get to the the employee parking in the back, if there is an easement agreement between Brager and Mr. Maddock for that. Just some site pictures, and as you saw in your staff report, that we did ask that the red and white plastic go-kart bumpers be removed from the site. You can see them in the front and the back. We did ask that a refuse enclosure be constructed in the rear. We have a dumpster just open, and we have barrels laying around, and the plastic bumpers, again, kind of just stored on site. We have truck trailers and equipment. We have some potholes in the back, some larger size potholes, and then other equipment just stored on site. And then this is the sign that I referred to, indicating that employee parking is in the back, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We're just looking for some clarity on whether or not an easement is needed for that, and also to consider that does possibly take away 22 spaces to patrons that would visit the property that would be dedicated to Brager parking. So this is just a recap of the conditions, suggested conditions in the staff report. We asked for immediate removal of equipment, vehicles, supplies that are being stored on site. We are asking for construction of a 4-sided refuse enclosure, immediate removal of the Brager Ford dumpster. So you can see Brager, for some reason, has their dumpsters located on this site rather than to the north. Removal of the plastic go-kart bumpers, repair and patching of damaged pavement, restriping of the parking stalls, they're quite faded, and then increased landscaping within the landscape island, which is this one right here. It's a good-sized island. It's winter, so maybe something's growing under there, but we did ask for a landscaping plan, and I think there's room for some substantial increase in landscaping. These are possibly dead trees, not sure. If they are, they should be removed. So with that, that's the recommendation. I know Mr. Maddock is here this evening if the Plan Commission has any questions that might be directed more towards him.
Did you go through all this stuff with them already, or?
Yeah, I did not go over it with them. The trailer, I'm always the guy that gets caught every time we're doing something. So we kind of brought that trailer there anticipating that we're going to be pulling our go-karts out. So the trailer is there actually to remove those the red and white barricades. The barrels actually were set outside because they were being collected that day. So they were gone. It is just like crazy. So in the picture you see a forklift. We were actually like in the process of kind of moving stuff around. There's bleachers that came out of that trailer, and so like I said, if I speed, I'm the guy that gets caught. So you got me. But all of those are completely valid, and I agree. I think the big thing with Lightspeed is, like, if you've ever walked into a business and go, man, this place has potential. I've been walking into that business for 8 years. I know that we have room to do better. And like what you're pointing out in the parking lot is an example of that. I guess I'm coming to telling you that we actually have a plan to start taking it really seriously. Over the last couple of weeks, and over the last couple of years, I've kind of realized how good we are, and I've kind of realized that by the people that have been coming back over and over and over again. We just had an amazing party there this weekend for one of the Milwaukee Bucks basketball players for his son's birthday. This is a guy that can go anywhere in the world to have his party, and he had it at Lightspeed. So Eric Bledsoe had unbelievable, and like half of the Bucks showed up for it. People flew in from around the world for this party at Lightspeed. So he flew people to come to
You didn't call
Milwaukee.
us and-
It's crazy. No, it's
I could have walked
it's,
there.
It's unreal. So I've never seen so many G wagons in one parking lot. It was pretty impressive. But we constantly hear that there's two things that we need. We need food and we need beer. And I think with that we would get a lot more attention and a lot more business, and it would allow us to have a little more revenue to do a better job making the building better. Your recommendations, I'd actually like to take a step further. Our front looks like poor. I mean, you just drive by, we need more planting in the front. So I think we need to do just a better job in general. But I think if we have the ability to serve some food and if we have the ability to serve some alcohol, we have the ability to have a little more revenue, and we can do that. So I've probably been guilty of doing too good a job taking care of my employees and not as much of a good job taking care of my my building, and I think that's something that I'm looking to change. I think I love 27th Street, and I think that it's a street that needs to have a better, better venues, better opportunities, and that's kind of why I'm coming here.
Okay. Just one thing I noticed with the parking question. So Brager's employees
Yeah.
park there usually during the day,
So
during the weekdays,
Yeah,
right?
there actually is a easement, it's documented with the, recorded with the deed on the property. So I have an easement to use the driveway. They have an easement to use that back portion of the parking lot. So like the dumpsters, they technically have a right to have them there. I maybe have to, I guess, I don't know how we deal with that, because they actually have like a lease for that parcel.
They'd still need to be enclosed.
I agree, yeah. But they're not like breaking rules, like in terms of like, they're not encroaching on my property by doing that. Brager's a really good neighbor. And I think we actually, it's kind of nice because when they're needing parking lots, their customers park in ours, and when we're needing them, we park in there. And we've never had to have any agreements or anything drawn up. We just have a mutual respect for actually working together.
One thing why I brought that up, it's funny, and this could be waste management for all I know. The 2018 Ariel actually has those dumpsters
I gotcha.
on Brager's property. And so when I went to the site and then they got moved over here, and like I said, that could be waste management for all I know, just not putting them in the same location. But
It's hard to say. It could also be snow plowing and stuff.
Oh,
We've been dealing with more snow than I think we wanted to deal with the last couple days or a couple weeks. So
Question on this is more for our staff.
Yeah.
The leased portion of the back, in my 25 years sitting up here, I've never seen someone be able to lease part of another property and put their dumpsters on the other property. I would think we want those dumpsters on the Brager property and enclosed properly on the Brager property. And I may have to go to the city attorney, but I've never seen this example ever. I don't know if you have come across this.
yeah, that would be ideal. Agreed. I would prefer that they be screened if they're on Mr. Maddox's property. I don't know that they're necessarily, maybe they are actually in the location of a parking stall. Yeah, if they're here, then that means they're losing 2 parking spaces.
I think your request is reasonable, and I think that it's something that we'll be able to accomplish.
Yeah, I could approach Brager too and ask if they'd be willing to just keep them on their property.
In an enclosure, of course.
I agree.
Property that they have
They have a
the
couple
business.
A
on.
building on,
They're
yeah.
building, yeah,
not the
the
vacant lot,
operation.
the former
Right.
Willows.
Yeah, I think what happened is when everything was subdivided, this agreement is from 1969. So when they were like drawing everything up back then and recording all the easements and everything, they basically exchanged a driveway. I'm leasing their driveway, they're leasing a portion of my parking lot. So it's a 99-year lease, so I kind of have to live with it for a little bit.
Were the dumpsters part of that lease or not?
No, it just basically, it's written in lawyer, so, it basically just says that they have the use to do what they want there, so.
I've never seen that, but
I haven't either.
Well,
ideally we'd want the dumpsters on.
but if they're leasing the property and it's wide open, they can do what they want,
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking.
then that's not really his property that they've got their dumpsters on. It's their property because they're leasing it, right?
So typically.
Well, then it would be his responsibility to make sure that they're enclosed.
Well, then he's,
Then.
Yeah.
Then be your responsibility.
Look into that one.
Did that make sense what I'm saying? Like,
I get what you're saying, which seems rather unfair, well, unless you're making a lot of money on that lease from them.
No, there's no money changes hands. It was $1 back in 1969.
Valuable consideration.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It makes sense why they did the agreement because of the way the land, the parcels are all put together here.
Yes.
Yeah, they
It's
won.
very hodgepodge, yeah, there's no choice in the matter, especially with the lot behind the brewery, they needed their driveway. So it makes perfect sense. I just think we need to investigate on where we want those dumpsters.
I honestly don't see it. Todd's a really reasonable guy and a pretty good business guy. He's not somebody that needs to skimp on something either. So I think it's probably just an oversight, and I'm sure as soon as I bring it to his attention, I think your request is reasonable.
I just have a question about the axe throwing lanes.
Absolutely,
How many
absolutely.
lanes are you,
Yeah, so what we're intending on doing initially is having 6 lanes, and there's actually something called the World Axe Throwing League, which is it's an organized group, and they have kind of criteria that you have to design your facility to in order to be a member of that, and we've done everything that way. The way that their recommendations are is that one instructor can oversee 6 lanes. And so when we first open up, we're going to open up with 6 lanes and have an instructor that's certified to oversee those lanes. And that the real goal is, and the reason we want to be a member of this is ESPN has started actually broadcasting the World Axe Throwing Leagues, and they're looking for more venues to have hosted. And so we've kind of designed ours to that specification, and we've communicated a little bit to them. And I think because of our relationship that we have with some other athletes, it kind of sounds like we're getting noticed. They've actually approached us to see when dates would be available for us to start hosting stuff. So I think like I said, we have a lot of potential there, and I think we're starting to recognize that.
so then there's fencing between the lanes?
Yeah,
and
they're
no food or beverage in the lanes?
Correct. Yeah, there's 1 axe allowed per lane, so it's not like multiple axes are thrown on any one lane. Basically, whoever throws the axe leaves the axe there. The next person that's
Right.
going to throw it goes and retrieves it. So there's not even a handoff between the people.
There's other venues in the water.
Right, I think there's 4. I
Yeah.
know there's one on the east side
Yep.
too. Yeah,
No, there
That's
are.
great.
I was really concerned about insurance on it, and it was amazing when I started speaking to insurance agents. They're saying that this is really, really easy to insure because it's actually, when you design it right, it's really safe.
Great.
So I wish my go-karts were that easy to insure. So, but again, we've really run things safe. We've been open for 8 years as of today, and we have not had a single incident where somebody's been injured on our go-karts. So we really put a lot of thought into how we run it. We probably overstaff just a little bit to make sure that it's safe. And I mean, we've so far have been really, really fortunate that way. The only claim we've ever had on our property is somebody slipped on ice, and God, we've had a lot of that.
Thank you.
Where's the football area?
So we are planning on actually pulling our go-karts out and replacing them with bowling that is played with football. Yeah, it's really fun. The one thing I really want to do is have more activities where parents participate with their kids. Our go-karts are great, but a parent drives so fast that the kid doesn't keep up, it's not fun.
Yeah.
So we kind of really been scouring looking for activities where when everybody plays together, you don't have to be super talented, you just play and have fun. Laser tag is cool because the kids are smaller, they're harder to shoot, they're harder to play against, and they tend to be better than the parents. So that one's kind of an even playing field. But the football, bowling, like a football doesn't go where you think it's going to go when you throw it. Like it bounces weird, knocks pins weird. So it's kind of funny how the kids oftentimes do as well as the parents. So.
Did you take that from First and Bowl?
Oh goodness, yeah. Actually, no. I saw it in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the first
Yeah,
time.
that's where those guys
Yeah.
are as well.
So I've been paying attention for a couple of years. I actually there was one that opened in Cincinnati, and I spent a lot of time down there, and so that was the first time I participated.
John, I have a question.
Yeah,
Are,
absolutely.
are you keeping the Lightspeed name? Are you changing it to 27 Social?
Yeah,
doing both?
we'd like to change it to 27 Social and basically have three themes within there. The bowling we're going to call pig pins because you're throwing a pig skin at bowling pins. The laser tag we're going to continue calling Lightspeed because it just kind of works really well. And then our axe throwing we're going to call the Milwaukee Axe Club. So we kind of have three, I guess, activities where you'll participate. The 27 Social is just overall, we're trying to get people to be social on 27th Street. I want to draw more attention to this street.
That's great.
So changing signs to
Absolutely,
27?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Gonna
Sounds
cover
fun.
all the windows in the front like it is now?
So
or-
there is no wall sign either,
So,
right? It's
yeah,
an
right-
architectural element.
Right now, we have basically a big splash on there, and I think that's something we want to update.
We'd agree.
I'm all for it. I think the look,
I like your concepts, I think
I
this
do
would be great.
too.
yeah, I think the look we're going for is really to kind of make it a little bit retro. I'm on the Business Improvement District Board for Highway 41. I really kind of want to bring a little bit of that nostalgia back. So I think we kind of like the, I guess, the marquee type letters where the lights are within them. I think we've got some neat looks that we're going to go with. Obviously, we'll have to run them past you guys.
Sounds fun.
That's the
really
goal.
does.
I'd make a motion to approve the proposed limited service restaurant and bar venue within Lightspeed. Authorize the public hearing to begin with regard to the special use, right?
Yeah.
March 17th.
Okay.
It would probably be March 17th, based on notice, right?
Okay.
Oh,
I'll second that. Oh, sorry.
And including the comments with regard to the site plan, which the applicant has graciously agreed to comply with. Understanding that the dumpster issue.
Right.
Is, I mean, from my perspective, as long as it's enclosed, nobody knows whose it is.
Right.
Yeah,
Can I ask one question on that? So a little bit of the problem we're going to have with getting the asphalt repaired is the winter and the asphalt plants aren't open.
Right.
There's an expectation that you'd have it done by this midsummer.
Okay.
Yeah.
just because
Asphalt plants aren't even open, so
they are or not?
they're not.
Yeah, I didn't think
Yeah,
so
that's
because I've been
not-
trying to get
That's
somebody.
not
Up
immediate.
until April, I think,
Yeah.
end of March or
Okay.
April.
And those dumpsters just need to be enclosed
And-
also, so.
Yeah, I agree.
There's an understanding that you're not gonna probably be, boring holes to put the posts in for the
Okay.
dumpster closure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should probably patch the holes, so something.
Yep.
even
Yeah.
So somebody doesn't get hurt.
Absolutely.
All right, motion was made and seconded, I guess I made that, seconded by
Yeah.
Collins.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, thank you.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see you guys there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Item 6A and B is the special use review for the US Cellular upgrade to the rooftop equipment at Associate
know.
Bank. And site and architectural plans for the same. Do we want to go through everything? I mean,
This is quite similar to
This
some of the
is-
towers. It's on the building though, and
I
it's
would make a
sheathed.
motion to
behind
approve
the
the item as
screening.
presented.
Second.
It's reasonable, I mean,
Motion made by
motion
Bob,
was
came
made
here.
by, did I make the motion, or Helene made the motion? Second, I made the motion, second by Helene, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 7 is temporary
Fantastic.
use permit for the parking of overflow used vehicles at the vacant property located 4825 West Forest Hill Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Herrera, the owner of Autoplex, is proposing a temporary use permit to park vehicles as overflow used vehicles at this site, which is a vacant property on Forest Home. Give you some different perspective without snow. These are Google images. This is the site that we're talking about. It's the south side of Forest Home in between George Webb and RB Automotive Center. And then a street view, this is what it looks like when there's green grass and leaves on the trees. They are proposing a parking layout for 30 vehicles As shown here, they would not park vehicles on the grass area. And then just a visual, they do have an existing business about 3 blocks away, and this is the existing business as it sits today. These are the vehicles that they are proposing to park at this particular location. As you saw in the staff report, staff is not recommending approval of the temporary use permit. They're asking to keep vehicles there for a minimum of 12 months. Used car lots are not allowed in the city today. I'm going to say new used car lots. Existing car lots can remain, they're grandfathered, but no one can propose a new one anywhere in the city. And so not approving the temporary use permit would be consistent with the zoning restrictions that we have in our code today. There is residential uses in the back here. This is a very visible corridor, and just don't want to get in the business of allowing used car lots to pop up throughout the city through the temporary use process. So that is staff's recommendation for this particular application.
I notice there's also minimal lighting, appears to be minimal lighting
Yes,
as well.
there's
That's
one
another,
light.
that's gonna
Yep.
cause an issue, I would think.
I'm not in favor of it. I think the
Yeah.
last temporary use, it was set back from the road probably 100 feet to any car started, so it just isn't the right spot for it.
If I may, I'm here representing Mr. Herrera. My name's Paul Zimmer.
You go up to the mic.
You're not, you gotta pick you up on the mic, sorry.
Is it on?
I did turn it on.
So I'm happy to address some of the concerns that you've raised or discuss any of the other issues. If anybody has any questions, or I've prepared a few things that I wanted to say if you want me to do that.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Paul Zimmer. I'm an attorney hired by Mr. Herrera. As you saw, Mr. Herrera owns Autoplex, a car dealership just a few blocks away from the site where he's proposing to store some vehicles. My understanding is that he has a growing business, a growing small business in the area, and he just needs this additional space, and it's right there just to park some more vehicles. So it's not going to be a used car dealership per se on that lot. It's just going to be overflow parking that gets run back and forth to his Autoplex dealership down the street. My understanding is the plan is vehicles would only remain in the lot for 2-3 weeks at a time. It would be vehicles that have been purchased and he's refurbished or repaired and is holding to sell at his lot. He wouldn't be posting for sale signs in the vehicles or writing with the markers, prices on the vehicles or anything like that. It's just gonna look like no different than the vehicles that are shown in the picture now, where there's vehicles on that lot, probably parking overflow for the two uses next door. I did if you take a look at the picture that's on the screen now, there is residential use on the back side of the lot. However, and I have an aerial photo if anybody'd like to see. On the back side of that lot, that's a pretty thick area of trees. And what's back there is the backs of people's garages, and then the actual houses aren't even for another half block up toward the other street. So I don't really think that this is a residential area. It's not zoned residential. It is.
Is it zoned for a car lot?
It's not. It's zoned C3, and Ms. Johnson, obviously is accurate about the zoning code and what's used and what's allowed and what's not. But here's what we propose. In the C3 zoning, I guess my recommendation to my client, if he wants to do this, is going to be, let's try to get the temporary use. Let's see if there's any issues. If there's issues in the next 12 months of the people behind complaining about all the cars in and out, okay. If there's issues with the neighboring restaurants, if people are complaining it's unsightly for some reason, then you just pull the temporary use in 12 months. And in the meantime, if there's not issues, I'll recommend to my client that we bring a petition to try to change the law in Z3 zoning to allow parking as a use. And again, it's not a used car dealership, it's simply just overflow parking. So I think that that's the best of both worlds. It allows the free use of the property, you know, and it allows a local small business owner to continue expanding his business. And, you know, I think somebody had mentioned there was a previous similar kind of use that was approved for one of the larger dealers recently, I think at the end of 2019. And there was a lot of notes, I looked at the minutes from that meeting, a lot of comments about the condition of that site, having some issues with the pavement and some other unsightly issues. If you look at this one, the site's great. I mean, it's already got green space, it's well paved, it's just sitting there. I mean, and if we don't let Mr. Herrera park his vehicles there, then it's just gonna sit there and go to no use. So I would say just, all we're asking is for the temporary use to be allowed, and if there's problems, and you can always end it. If there's not problems, and Mr. Herrera thinks it's worth it, we will try to pursue a change in the zoning that would allow the use on a permanent basis. But why not have the test run?
So there was a test run at this site
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
With another dealer. And I'm trying to, and I apologize for looking at my phone. I don't usually like to look at phones when I'm in meetings. And it was a disaster.
It was.
There were cars with, I mean, just so you know, that we did do the experiment once before. There was a temporary use permit that somehow was issued by the planning department before Mrs. Porter, sorry, that's her new name soon. Before she was here, there was a temporary use permit for about a year. There were cars that had flat tires that were in states of disrepair and essentially stored there, and it didn't go well at all. So that's why I'm a little reluctant to do it. The second thing is, while I wasn't here, when the used car lot ordinance was enacted, I don't even think I was an older person when that happened.
I was planning, but that's about it. That was way, way back.
So there was a decision that's going on a couple of decades at least with regard to concern about the proliferation of used car lots. And not saying anything disrespectful to Crazy Jim or Diamond Jim, but they tend to not enhance the value of those businesses that are around them through their very aggressive marketing efforts. I don't know if that's a polite way to say that.
Okay, I do have a question.
And so just from my perspective, I mean, the one thing is that we've tried this once before. Two, the zoning prohibits it. It's not even a special use in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not sure how we can, legally do it. There was this idea with regard to, I guess the final thing is with Schlossman Honda. Honda had temporarily, and it was an annual, pretty strictly enforced agreement with Schlossman Honda that it would park new cars as a staging area at the former Knights of Columbus site. That site has since been sold. There has been action by the Common Council, and I think by this body, temporarily allowing those cars to go to a former trucking terminal on Layton. Yeah. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but the discussion at the Planning Commission and at the Common Council was that this was sort of a temporary measure, because the area adjacent to the freeway, which had no residential people around it, was being displaced for a new hospital. I mean, I understand that, I think this is Mr. Meon's property, right, that he would be leasing to this gentleman?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I understand the concern, but I mean, I think the Autoplex, your Autoplex, where's your Autoplex? Is that right?
It's about,
Is that a Milwaukee business or a Greenfield business?
It's a Milwaukee business
It's
across
Milwaukee
the street.
business. Okay, well,
Yeah,
then
it's
I withdraw
across-
my comments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
I also remember at the time that there was concern by the George Webb Restaurant was going through an ownership change, I think, at that time. if I'm not mistaken, and there was concern about having all the junky cars parked next to it. And I think the auto business to the northeast had similar concerns. So I wouldn't be in favor of it, but. I mean,
Security would be an issue too.
Yeah, I mean, there's no lighting there as well.
I don't know if I'd want lighting either. No landscaping from the street.
Right.
Yeah, the landscaping that exists with the adjacent businesses, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that doesn't look so great.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a stab at addressing some of those concerns. Obviously, I was not aware that 4 years ago this was already
I don't know if
tried,
it's
and there
4
was
years ago or
issues.
2,
Oh,
3,
it's
4,
more than
5
that,
years
yeah.
ago. I mean, I will continue to look through my iCloud account.
It sounds, based on what you described, like the issues were more the condition of the vehicles and how it was being used by that owner of that lot. And in this case, you know, we have a different owner. If you look at Autoplex's website, it looks great. The vehicles look great. It's not some junky place. And we can put conditions on the temporary use permit that say, if you have a single flat tire in any of these vehicles sitting on this lot, it's revoked. If you have any, you know, visibly damaged vehicles sitting on the lot, if they're all in disarray and all disorganized, it's revoked. I mean, you can call them back in here at any meeting and take it away. And just because some,
So can I just interrupt you
Sure.
quickly? So once we kind of give a legal right to do something, it's not so easy to say, well, you know, I noticed that there's a car with blown out tires in your parking lot, your temporary use is revoked. There are certain legal rights and certain due process rights that you have with regard to that. So it doesn't mean that it's just revoked in any way, shape, or form. It means that the due process begins. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I go through this sort of all the time with
Sure.
some other businesses. It's like, okay, condition is that you're gonna have, say, a dumpster enclosure, right? And they don't fix it, and they don't fix it, and they don't fix it. And the condition of their special use, like this gentleman that was before you, is that you have a dumpster enclosure. And we write the letter saying you have a certain period of time to do the dumpster enclosure, and they don't do it. And then they put up a dumpster enclosure, and then they don't do something else, right? Or the dumpster enclosure gets hit by a garbage truck, and I can point specifically to a restaurant or two if you'd like me to. Something knocks it over, right? And it's like, well, we can't do it till spring. Well, we can't do it till summer. We can't do, well, we moved that one, but now there's a new one, which is a new occurrence. So it's not, when we get into these situations, it's sort of a slippery slope, right? You don't, you know, is it a use that I mean, the primary issue should be, is this from my perspective, is this a use that makes the city a better place? And is it something, you know, I understand that Christie and the city attorney and everybody else have all sorts of legal and bureaucratic reasons to do it, but that's kind of how we look at it.
the other concern that I wanted to address that you had raised is, you know, again, my understanding of the prohibition on the used car lots in the city is, you know, not wanting the advertising and the you know, sales and things like that that's going on that would go along with that. And again, I just have to emphasize, this lot would not have sales, advertising, or anything like that. It would just simply be storage. And as far as, you know, security and landscaping, again, those are all things that we can use through conditions of the temporary use permit to address. I mean, we should let him have the chance to improve the landscaping if that's a concern, or to add lighting if that's a concern. With the business just down the street, the employees will be monitoring that lot all the time. I don't think there's going to be a security issue. I really think it would be unfair to allow another dealer to have a similar use and not allow Mr. Herrera this use. And I also think it would be unfair to not allow this temporary use when, just because some other dealer in the past didn't do a good job at it. I mean, that's just because somebody ran a poor ship before doesn't mean that we shouldn't give Mr. Herrera the opportunity to try to do it right this time.
I would just like to add the word storage was just used. Storage is an appropriate use in our manufacturing zoning districts, not an appropriate use for our commercial districts, commercial corridors such as West Forest, Home Avenue.
And also, as far as the security, right, you're saying, oh, the employees are gonna watch, yeah, they're gonna watch it when the business is running, right, but not, what about nighttime?
Do you have anything
You
for
know, I mean,
nighttime
how is that,
security?
If you could just say if you could say who you are.
Hi, how are you? I'm Mauricio Herrera. I'm the owner of Autoplex. How are you guys? Hi, well, actually, I had a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors, you know, and we talked and we had different ideas. 'Cause now there's no lighting there at all, and there's a lot of posts there right now that you can add lighting to make it more visible. And I told them that I was agreeing to do that. And also, they talked about that they may have wanted a wooden fence, maybe along the edge where it meets the houses, a wooden fence to stop foot traffic from going through. I mean, I really don't have,
Can I just ask you one question?
Sure.
Is it your intent to always have, let's just pretend
Sure.
for a moment that we gave you the ability to temporarily park cars here for a year?
Sure.
Is it it sounds like it's your intent that you would like to park cars there forever,
No,
for 1 year.
my intent is 1 year,
And
but
then after 1 year, you understand that after you put the fence up and then the lighting in, if that was a requirement of temporary use,
sure,
that we would not extend it.
sure. What I was
Not extend it. You
Yes.
understand that if we
Yes.
allowed you to do it for a year, even if everything was perfect.
Right.
That after a year, you couldn't park cars there anymore.
Well, my plans are actually only to use it for 1 year, but we're planning on maybe buying the property and coming back and,
So you understand, I just want you to know.
Yes.
That there is no permitted or special use to sell used cars in the city
Yes.
of Greenfield,
well,
ever.
yes, I understand that. What,
That every alder person, and I've started been around for like 20 years,
right,
only one alder person, in fact. There's only been one alder person that's been in favor of allowing the sale of used cars
Sure.
in the city.
well, actually, just to give you a quick summary what my plans are, I'm looking to expand. So I was, in the future, I wanted to maybe buy that property and buy the one next to it to make one big property and use it as what the property is now next to it. It's an auto repair shop right now. So I was, I don't know if you've seen on Layton, there's, you ever see the storage places that have very nice decorative with columns and gates around it? I was thinking of, you know, coming back to the city, and I already talked to the owner that owns the property next to this property, and I was trying to maybe purchase both and make one big property and merge it together. That's my plans for the future if I was to stay there. But I do not plan on ever renting it again for storage at all whatsoever after this year.
So when you combined it, will you try to make it a used car lot?
No, I would join it with the one next to it to make one big repair shop, one big old, automotive repair.
Understand, if you came here tonight
Yes.
and you said, it's my intent to purchase the property to the northeast, which is a repair shop, and to combine
Yes.
this property with that as a repair shop.
Yes.
That would be a permitted I shouldn't call it permitted use, it would be a special use.
Yes.
That could happen.
Yeah, Miss Christy Johnson sent me a list of things that are permitted use, and I went through it, and I know it's a special use that you need to get granted. So this whole year, I'll be working on plans to have that approved before I even bought the property. If nothing gets approved, I wouldn't buy it. You know, I want to plan ahead, and, you know, I'm not going to buy it if I can't use it.
I don't think that you will, and I will only speak for myself, and
Sure.
I can't speak for the other persons.
Sure.
I can't support the temporary storage of used cars at this site,
Second.
because I lived through the last one, and and I'm not doubting that you're the nicest person in the world. I mean, and that you are a man of your word and have incredible integrity.
Well, I mean,
But I'm not gonna go through I'm not
I
gonna.
think it would be very hard to control as well, as far as I guess security, I get you putting light, but I still
The
think,
thing
With-
that
I think it'd
see
be hard
is
to manage.
the
But-
used car salesman down the street, that he's selling a car that's legally on your Milwaukee property, and the customer says, but I don't want that kind of car, I want this kind of car, and he says, oh, wait a second, we do have one in storage. How are you gonna keep that salesman from driving across the street
Well,
down the road
yeah.
to showing a car that's on that property?
I have answers to all
It
of that.
becomes it becomes a used car
Well-
lot just purely on the essence that you
Inherently it
are
does.
storing
Well-
your potentially, your cars that are going to be potentially sold.
Okay, and just so you know, we actually own 7 dealerships in the Milwaukee area. And if you guys saw ARS the way it was before we took it over, I mean, that place was a dump. I mean, it looked like a salvage yard. If you go there now and look at ARS, we not only improved the property, we improved, you know, the way the whole image of that Forest Home was compared to before.
It
I
does
mean,
look better now than it did a few years ago.
yeah, I mean,
agree.
we actually are this winter, I mean, this summer that comes up, we're gonna have the whole thing paved with a new blacktop. I mean, we're selling 50 cars out of there a month. We have 7 car lots. We're not starting off. We're not a new dealership, you know?
Do you have a lot of car lots on Forest Home?
No, we have down on the south side, down, you know, Arandas, down on 27th, and it used to be a bank. We bought the bank there. It used to be a bank.
Layton State Bank?
Yeah, it used to be a bank. We bought the property, and yeah, and then we owned the one across the street, and we actually knocked down a building that was running down. It was pretty much falling apart. We knocked the building down. We built another garage there. We spent about $250,000 on that property. You know, we invest a lot of money in our properties. We don't run bad car lots. I mean, every property we go into, we improve it, you know? And
For purposes of full disclosure, is there a car lot on 23rd and Forest Home that you may be leasing to a certain person from Greenfield?
oh,
Linda, something?
yeah, no, well, that one, my brother leased it to her. We're a family of brothers. We all work together, you know? My brother leased her a property on that area where you're talking about.
Forest Home?
Across from Walgreens. Yeah, where Forest Home and Lincoln meet.
I think, I'm
Yeah.
not sure I haven't.
Look, and honestly, this property right now that we're talking about, it's been vacant for years. Mr. Meehan's a very nice guy. He's built very nice properties. You know, he improved the city too. You know, it'd be nice to give him some kind of help, you know, with all the tax he's paid on the property being empty. And there's a chance someone's going to take it over and improve it. I mean, this is a chance, you know, that it's not only going to help the city of Greenfield, it gives you a chance for someone to do something with it. You know, if it doesn't get approved later on, it doesn't, you know, but it's been vacant forever. The landscaping looks terrible. There's no lighting. There's people walking around all over it. No one plows the snow on it, you know. It's going to look only better if I use it for some time, you know, than what it looks now. It's been vacant for like 15 years.
I'd encourage you to, if you're serious about buying the property next door and going through those plans, I'm not supportive of a storage lot. But I would encourage you, if that's really your plans, is buy the properties and see if you can. I'd encourage you to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's going to be in the future, and it takes a lot of money to buy properties. It doesn't happen that, it's not cheap.
I would support that concept that you talked about. I wouldn't support it as a storage lot.
Yeah, I mean, I just really think it's unfair, you know, that a bigger dealer, you know, can get something accomplished when us smaller dealers are, you know, growing really, really fast. We're doing really good business, and we're providing a lot of tax money for the cities. You know, we sell over $1 million in sales a year, you know, and we have probably close to like probably 7 or 8 million a year that we're doing in, you know, revenue for the cities, you know, of car lots that we run. Every car that we run makes money and is successful, and we make money and we fix the properties. You know, we're not like a car lot that just opens it and closes it and changes owner every single year. I mean, every property that we actually buy it, we buy properties, we don't rent them. So when you buy something, you're gonna invest money in it, you're gonna make it better, you know?
But aren't you renting a property to somebody else right now?
I rent a lot of properties. Yeah, I mean, we have like 30 properties.
Well, but I'm just trying to say that there's a couple issues, right? So once we give, under the zoning code, let's assume, hypothetically, right? You got a temporary use permit, you managed to convince the common council to change the zoning to allow the sale of used cars, right? And the common council does it because they think you're the best thing since baked bread, right? That you do everything that you say you're gonna do. The problem is, and the problem that has historically happened is, the really nice guys that do great things, at some point, sell it or lease it to somebody else. And that's often
Yeah.
the case with gas stations, by the way. So while you may be the best person in the world, the decision that's being made with regard to the use and the zoning of your property, which is not permitted in any way, shape, or form right now under the zoning code, doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna be the guy that's always gonna be in control of the property that we can always rely on.
Well, I mean, right now, I'm not buying the property right now. I'm just leasing it for a
You're
year.
just leasing it, but well,
Did I make
so the thing is, like, so you bring up the Honda thing, right? The Honda thing is, you know, this isn't forever. You know, we're not buying a trucking terminal so we can park cars here forever, and we're gonna turn into a Honda dealer, a
Sure.
new Honda dealer in the
Sure.
future. We need a place to store cars quickly, and we're gonna maybe do it for a year or two until we can figure out where we're gonna do it. But we have no intention to come in and change the laws. We have no intention to open a dealership there. We have no intention to do anything there, right?
This is the same concept. I mean,
No, this is
it's
a,
nowhere
this
near.
is a.
Because you're changing.
So let me,
So
can I
the,
clarify?
the intention is, well, you know, we wanna do this temporarily, and then after a year, based on what your attorney said, we're gonna
This is what
come
I'd like to
in, and we're gonna look at the zoning code, and we're gonna see if we can't change it so that we can sell cars there.
never says
But, and I can, and I don't know what will happen, but I
know.
think almost without a doubt, it won't happen, that won't happen. And then the question is, well, you know, for the last year, we stored cars here, and that was great, can we do it for another year? And maybe you could do it for another year, but you can't do it forever. And you will never sell used cars there, and there's no plan right now to take over the garage next door to turn it into a repair shop, which would be subject to a public hearing and special use review ultimately.
I'd like to clarify an earlier statement that I made. I said earlier that we were seeking a temporary use, and that if Mr. Herrera wanted to continue storing cars there past the temporary use, then I'd recommend to him that the way to do that would be to try to change the zoning law. I was unaware that Mr. Herrera's plan involves only the 12-month use. So I don't want anybody to construe my statement of if he wanted to stay there, this is what I'd recommend we try to do as his plan. His plan, you heard it from him, is to try to buy that lot over the next 12 months and create the repair place, which is the special possible use under the zoning code. So I would hate to have anybody, you know, think that I was trying to mislead anybody or that we're not being truthful about what his plans are. I simply did not realize that was the plan.
No one would ever even remotely suggest that.
But, you know, I get back to the point of,
If he
it's
wants
just
to
12
buy the
months.
property on a contingency, and the contingency is that he can commingle it or combine it with a property to the northeast, that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Yeah,
You don't
but,
have to buy it. You
No,
can
no,
get it-
see-
You can do it on contingency.
but just to
be
clarify though, my plans in the future of what I think I could do is still subject to you guys' approval, you know?
What is that? What would that,
Well, no.
what would that be?
So today, I just came to rent it for 12 months and that's it.
No,
There's-
but just tell me what are your plans for the future? What would you love to do at this site?
Okay.
With your other 30 properties?
So, right now, for this property, my only intended use right now whatsoever is just 12 months and get out. That's my intended use right now. If for some reason I got an architect to do plans and I came back for future plans, that's completely separate from what I want to do now. You know, if that got approved, then I will do that step later. Right now, I just want to I want it to be fair that I get the same opportunities that other bigger dealers get. You know, just because we're a smaller dealer, doesn't mean we should have any less opportunities than than the big fish.
They're two different examples. One's less than, you know, one can be kicked out at a moment's notice to feed a better development, like a hospital. And this one is, I just want to park cars here that are untitled, unlicensed, right up to the sidewalk for 12 months. I mean, that doesn't even sound the same.
What's the
And
difference
the other
between
one-
this and what the other dealer's doing? What's the difference?
Security, 24 hours a day,
No.
too.
The zoning at the trucking terminal is different than the zoning, is that?
Right.
Which allowed that to happen.
Yeah, and the zoning here is
It's not even permitted under the zoning law.
Yeah.
And temporary uses, generally speaking, are for 30, 60, 90
Well,
days.
You know,
We can talk about the Honda thing, and we can go into great detail about what the differences are and the distinctions are.
Well-
Those are pretty much easy.
well, let me ask you this. I know that you guys want something done with the property eventually, and I know that you guys eventually want something done. You know, who's gonna go in there? Who knows? You know, someone.
Are. I mean, if, so this is the thing that this is how, just giving you advice. If it's your desire to acquire the property to the northeast, I would put that property under contract. If it's your desire to combine that property with this property, I would, under that contract, have a contingency on that sale that it's contingent on the city of Greenfield approving the expansion of that business onto this property, which is a permitted special use, which comes before here, which allows the landscaping and the fences and the lighting and all those things to be addressed on a permanent basis. That's how
See,
you wanted to do it.
Sure.
And that's how you could use this property
Sure.
for a future use, which both you and your attorney have
Well,
suggested would maybe happen.
what I'm noticing right now is that we're focusing a lot on something I didn't submit for this time. You know, we're focusing on talking about me buying it, me doing this, me doing that. But that's not the reason why I applied this time. You know, that's gonna be later down the line when I come back.
So then come back in the future, the property hasn't, you could argue, and one of your arguments is the property hasn't sold in 15 years. It makes it a captive piece of property, probably to an adjacent property owner. So if this idea is, well, if I don't do it now, then I will never be able to purchase it, it doesn't seem to be a very good argument, right?
Well, the thing is this: whenever I buy a property, if I see that it's gonna be worth my time and effort and money to invest a lot of time in this property, I will do it. You know, but if it's gonna be something that I can't develop, then I'm not gonna buy it. You know, right now.
So what, of the 30 properties that you have, what are the uses on those 30 properties?
Don't do that.
A lot of them are rentals,
Rental what?
housing.
Housing?
Yeah, a lot of them are housing. Most of them are housing. You know, they're apartments. They're
Many of them are used car lots.
Can somebody make a motion?
So, I mean, I don't, under the code, it's not permitted.
Right.
At all.
So I think we could probably just.
You have to take one step at a time.
I mean, for crying out loud, it's parking cars on a paved parking lot. So if you're gonna deny it, deny it. But come on.
We are
Let
gonna,
the guy run his business
we are
and park cars on a parking
we are
lot.
not in any way, shape, or
Seriously.
form, I mean, I
What
appreciate
gives you guys the right to sit here and tell him he can't use that property that way?
the zoning code.
I understand that, but come on, let's get real.
I appreciate your drama, I appreciate your drama. I would
you know
appreciate
what?
it also if
It's
you'd lower
really
your voice.
unfortunate
Because
that,
none of us are yelling at you. We've outlined why the law is what the law is. We've provided you with options in the future to comply with what was once a plan, but really isn't a plan, but might be a plan. We've done that. I think we've done that in a very reasonable way.
Which is something that your client presented to us as an option. It wasn't our idea, it was his idea. He brought that up.
Would you guys, I mean, okay, you know, I understand you guys don't want it. It's fine, you know,
Okay.
it happens, you know. Would you guys allow at least 6 months for me to try and do something with the property?
So one of the issues that you have is that somebody already tried this, and it didn't work out very well.
I never saw them put up lighting, landscaping, anything, and
No,
improve it at
because
all.
they promised they were gonna do all sorts of things, and they never did. Right. And irrespective of that, it wasn't in any way, shape, or form what was promised. So I think there's also a reluctance here to do it.
Well, I know, I guess I figured you guys seeing what I did with ARS, you will see I would improve this. You know, ARS was improved 20 times over. I mean, I don't see how you guys don't see that. I mean, I improve that property. Every property I go to, I improve it. I mean, I can't believe you guys don't see that, you know?
I'm not, no one's disagreeing with it, you can improve the property. You can't start, that's fine, I mean, that's fine. So, I mean,
I'll make a motion.
Had no chance from the start.
I'll
Commissioner
second
Weiss,
that
second by
motion.
Commissioner Rogers. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's,
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8, discussion and review regarding the adoption of the proposed updated City of Greenfield Comprehensive Plan. There you go.
Good evening, everyone. Did you want to do an introduction, or you want me to just dive right in? Thanks. Counterintuitive. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name's Jackie Mish. I'm an associate planner with Vanderwall and Associates. I'm joined here today by Scott Harrington, principal with Vanderwall and Associates. We are, as you know, working with the city to update the city's comprehensive plan. This is the 10-year update of that document. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the first draft of that comprehensive plan. This draft was developed with input from this body, as well as a lot of diligent efforts by your community development staff. And so we hope that it reflects the things that you would like to see in the plan. But my goal for today is to make sure that we've had a chance to talk about what is in the plan, what might be missing, how we can improve the plan, and so that as we move toward adoption, we are all satisfied with what's included in the plan. So today I would like to discuss a few of the key topics that we hope to cover, the special interest areas that are described in detail in the plan, changes to the plan's future land use map, and I'd like also to highlight some of the key recommendations of the plan, which are found in Table 4, the implementation table. So throughout the process, throughout my presentation, I would love it if anyone had ideas or suggestions. Feel free to jump in and we can talk about how we can make the plan meet your needs. So I think we can go to the next. Oh, I have my clicker. I can do it myself. Oh, let's see. Does it need to be turned on? Wait, point it that way? That's strange. I'll try that. Sad. It's blinking. Oh. Maybe, does it not work with the PDF? Oh, that could be. Sorry about that. I wonder if it doesn't cooperate with the clicker.
It has, but it's.
Oh, okay. I'll just chill.
You want to do the PowerPoint?
We could try that, yeah. Do you have that, or do you need me to bring that up? Okay.
Drive, and then way down at the bottom, see Greenfield comp plan. There you go. One more. Yeah, that's the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
There you go, Jackie.
Let me give it a shot. No. Hey, we're in business. So key topics that we hope to cover with the plan update. A lot of this came from the conversation we all had several months ago. Recognizing that population growth and redevelopment is necessary to sustain the city as a built-out community. There's nowhere to go but up, and so making the most of land that you do have, infill development and redevelopment, is really where most of the city's growth potential lies. That said, we want to increase density and intensity in strategic locations, just not throughout the city and not through our single-family neighborhoods. There's a desire to provide housing options for all life cycles, all life stages. Desire to support local businesses and not and options besides big box retail. Desire to see redevelopment in outdated commercial corridors. Desire to see increased emphasis on bicycle and pedestrian access, especially between neighborhoods and key destinations in the community. And also desires to improve the appearance of 27th Street, knowing that that's a collaborative.
One quick thing here too, that also, so we have two key relationships with the city of Milwaukee. One was missing here, the other is Forest Home.
Yeah.
Oh.
So,
Make a note of that.
no, I've been working, well, I've been historically been working with Alderperson Borkowski in the city of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And historically Alderperson Witkowski in the city of Milwaukee on 27th Street.
Great. You know, and I don't think the plan.
But this was one of these key.
Yeah, I don't know how detailed the plan gets on that, so I think it would be worth clarifying that in the plan. So a key component of the comprehensive plan is in the land use chapter, there's descriptions of so-called special interest areas. These are actually a concept that emerged from the city's 1992 comprehensive plan. They were carried forward into the city's 2008 comprehensive plan with some updates. And we felt that it was time to take a fresh look at those special interest areas, especially since a lot of those special interest areas have been completed or developed in other ways. And so there's definitely an opportunity to take a fresh look and make sure that this concept still works for the city. And so working closely with city staff, we are able to eliminate a lot of the special interest areas. Originally, there were about 36 special interest areas. We got that down to about 22. Then we couldn't resist adding a few more on top of that. So these, I think, better reflect areas of special planning focused in the community. And so in the land use chapter, these areas are described in a little bit more detail than you would see simply on the future land use map. So the future land use map would assign a color, plan mixed use, plan business, for example. These special interest areas actually have a narrative description in the plan, providing a little more nuance, more detailed recommendations about how those areas might unfold over the coming years. One change that we made to the comprehensive plan was when we updated the future land use map, we actually put the SIA boundaries right on that map, so it makes it much easier to find them and also understand what the general recommendation for future land use is for each one of those SIAs. So I didn't want to go through all of them, but I thought I would show you a few that we looked at specifically in this plan update process. One thing I did want to point out in case anyone is curious, I did not renumber the SIAs yet, just because it would create confusion as we added and removed different SIAs. But I think what a good thing to do at the end of the process would be, once we've solidified how many SIAs we have, we could renumber them in a kind of logical format, east to west. But at this time, I want to leave them alone just for my own sanity. So here's the SIAs I'd like to focus on briefly with all of you. Updates to existing SIAs for the Civic Center, Loomis Crossing, and 76th and Cold Spring. And then also added 4 new SIAs for Spring Mall, the Pines of Greenfield, former Sears site near Southridge, and 103rd in Oklahoma. I will get to that. So very briefly, SIA 22, number 22, I'm sure you're familiar with. It's the area surrounding the Civic Center. It's the area kind of at Layton and Loomis. It's a larger area outlined in red. It's surrounding Conkle Park and a few other city facilities. This is an area where basically the whole site has long-term redevelopment potential. In particular, kind of south of the park and toward in the back, kind of in the interior of this area, there's undeveloped land. A lot of those lots on Loomis Road are very deep, so there's infill potential here. There's also potential to look at the site as a whole and come up with, and to see different uses in the future. In the short term, I think some aesthetic improvements could be added, particularly for the bowling alley and adjacent uses. So that's one area that we've kind of refreshed based on all the changes that have happened in the last 10 years in this area. Loomis Crossing, I will talk about this one a little bit more, but we made sure to update the SIA boundaries to include all the parcels that needed to be included here, recognizing this as a redevelopment priority for the city. We also updated our recommendation. Yeah, absolutely. There we go.
So where all that white stuff is with the red lines going through it?
That's right of way, which is why it doesn't show up.
But it's not going to be right away?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's probably one of those things that you should put like diagonal pink lines through or something saying future acquisition by the city for development. It just kind of makes the whole area.
Yeah.
So sorry about that, I didn't have my mic on. So when it comes to the 894 and Loomis interchange, yes, it is right away, but hopefully in the near future, it won't be right away. So it makes sense to include that in the long-term comprehensive plan as being something that's going to be developed.
Absolutely, and I would
probably be pink.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to point out is you see the green triangle. That's so under the current agreement with the state where we acquired the quitclaim deed that needs to be park. That was a condition from the state. So that's the turf skateboard park, right?
Yep, got it.
Yep.
Great. Wanted to highlight some changes to SIA number 32, which is an area just kind of just south and southwest of Spring Mall. Acknowledging, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but Spring Mall is really a prime redevelopment site, and so the area just to the south and southeast, 76 and Cold Spring, definitely has potential to redevelop in a manner that's complementary to whatever happens at Spring Mall. So the plan is showing planned mixed use and planned business. We'd imagine that in the future, these uses would probably be a little less intense than development that occurs at Spring Mall, simply because there's neighborhoods on several sides of that area. Pines of Brookfield. This is an area just south of Layton near 60th, mostly west of the cemetery. Gotta check my notes here. This is an area where there's potential for residential infill. Some undeveloped land kind of on the interior of the site, as you can see outlined on the map. Basically, the plan recommends opportunities for higher intensity residential, but recognizing with single-family neighborhood to the south and two-family neighborhood to the southeast, or at least planned for that, transitioning land uses so that maybe lower density, smaller scale multifamily might transition to higher density, more on the interior of the site, away from the neighborhoods. Okay, and finally, we added the Sears site just near Southridge, just at the south end of town, as a potential redevelopment site. We know that Southridge is sort of repositioning itself and trying to figure out what it looks like in this new retail landscape, pivoting a little bit toward an entertainment destination type place. And so I would imagine that this site should be complementary to that type of use. Obviously, we would want to work with the Village of Greendale on making sure that those uses remain complementary.
So just with regard to 40, the boundary should probably be expanded all the way to 68th Street.
Sure.
There's a Puremax Bank there that's not going anywhere, but the Aurora Health Club and the office building have all at one point or another been sort of in play. The second thing is that where the Greenfield Fashion Plaza is, as you go north along 74th Street, on the east side where it's currently pink, that's probably something that we look at redeveloping in the future, and it probably needs to be cohesive, so you could probably expand 40 to that.
Yeah.
When it gets to the green there, that's Jansen Park, and that will always be a park. But there's the idea that you would incorporate that potentially into any development along that site. I'm not sure if the brown is accurate as far as how far the apartments intrude in, though. I don't think I'm not sure they.
Yeah, those are the apartments, but.
That's right.
But do they go to the boundary of the property line of the
I'd say
commercial property?
They
I
go
don't-
right up to the park.
Yeah.
But they do.
That's pretty close there, I
True.
think.
They're like 50, 100 feet away.
Right, yeah, they're super close to that
Yeah,
park.
They
very
are.
close.
Right, but I thought that the park was bigger. I thought the park was deeper than the green that you see there.
Your kids were much younger when they played.
They don't play Pee Wee ball there anymore. We played at Kawiki Park. It was always a terrible place. Okay, so I mean, from my perspective, the redevelopment there is probably critical. Also, part and parcel to that is west of 76th Street, where the Pancake House is, and the vacant office building, which is that little square on the lower left-hand corner. That is probably also ripe for redevelopment. And that could probably be included in 40, even though it's not contiguous.
Are you going all
How
the
about
way
this
to
one right here?
Layton with
That
that or
little-
not?
that little-
Along
this little-
74th? I got that one.
Yeah.
Why'd you stop at the park?
You could probably go all the way to 76th Street and touch it.
How to Layton? How far north are you going?
I'm not going to Layton, I'm going to 76th Street. Well, no,
Edgerton.
so when we're going north, I was going to the edge of the park,
Well, why don't we go to Layton?
because there's the yellow there are single-family residential
I was
homes.
talking any other side of the street.
But the other side of the street where the three homes are immediately adjacent to the commercial, to the Olive Garden restaurant, that would probably be included in there, because those three homes have always been in play. And historically, we've always talked about doing something there. So basically, and then you get into, and I don't know how you put this in a comprehensive land use plan, but the entire Southridge Commercial District from basically Barnard to the southern boundary of the city, along 76th Street, and we've had some action now with Barnes and Noble, right? The redevelopment into a different kind of use. A lot of those properties are very tired, and there's got to be sort of a
Regenesis thing.
it's got to be sort of examined kind of, we do always examine it globally despite individual property ownership. But it makes sense to look at that cohesively, and I don't know how you do that in a comprehensive land use plan. Actually, you could go all the way to the freeway with the two muffler shops and some of that stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, all the way down 76.
And what's that other property that's kind of had the
Paint-
Star Wars and
painting
miscellaneous
company or
stuff in?
Oh, I see.
Does that make sense?
Right by
You know,
between T.J. Jefferson and Muffler Shop.
It used to be a Star Wars thing?
Yeah, it used to be a Star.
It's still a Star Wars
They
thing.
sell collectibles there.
So-
That thing just,
So apparently he tunes pianos.
it just
there.
lives on.
Just learned that.
The Star Wars thing, it just keeps on going. It just.
It's amazing.
How about we do one special interest area for Sears Southridge, and then we could make another one, basically everything on both sides of 76,
I mean, it's-
including 74th, on the east side of 74th.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine however you do it, but the reality is that it's all kind of cohesive, right? So it doesn't matter if you call 41, 42, 43,
Right.
I don't care what you do, but all of those,
You want it all highlighted?
I think so.
Okay.
Right?
They're going to change so like the old FedEx building and the three houses on 74th Street, and I think Greenfield Fashion Plaza with the increased vacancy as those retailers start moving towards higher visibility sites. And the vacant Shore West building on 76th Street, south of Edgerton, next to the Pancake House. It's not suggesting the Pancake House is going anywhere, but it's a very old and tired building. A place that I used to indulge in blueberry syrup as a child.
You and me both.
Good place for
I
that.
love the blueberry syrup. Or boysenberry, sorry. Okay, sorry.
No, not at all. So, this is the kind of thing that I'm hoping that we can do in this meeting. So this is excellent. So we'll add that 76th Street area and we'll expand SIA 40 to include those parcels we just described.
I guess what we're trying to say is that 76th Street, probably from our city limits to Spring Mall, is critically important, that entire stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that includes special bits and pieces in there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could recommend in the plan that the city look at doing a corridor plan for 76th Street if you thought that was appropriate.
Probably is.
Yeah, I think that's
But this is-
hinting at, yeah.
Yeah, but this is cheaper. And I just read West Dallas's quarter plan and I wasn't that impressed. No offense to West Dallas.
staff was either.
So, just so you know.
That's done outside, wasn't it?
Hmm?
That's done outside.
It was done outside, I'm not sure, so I won't.
You do it. Okay.
Okay.
And I do have one more. This one was added due to the change in property ownership and the very north side of the city. So recognizing that there's healthcare uses, hospitals in this area. SIA 41 is primed for other complementary healthcare uses. And so recognizing that this is an area where land use is likely to change.
Do you
we
know
added
anything about
this.
number 9?
Not off the top of my head, but I could look it up.
So number 9 is a park what's the name of that park again? Hart Park? No.
Oh, Holt?
Holt Park.
Oh, right.
So
Right.
we have a wonderful park, which I think is number 9 there,
Yeah, it is.
which is supposed to be connected between at one point. Do
41.
you see that zigzagly line through there? That road?
That road that doesn't really exist?
It doesn't exist, but I'm curious if that,
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. It shouldn't be on the map.
We took it out, actually.
so
We took
that's
it out of
one
the
thing probably-
narrative.
I think
The,
it's plotted. I think it is actually.
no, I'm saying we took that as a special interest area out of the narrative. It just isn't reflected on the map yet.
But
Yeah.
it can be a special interest area.
Wouldn't it be?
Would you like it to be?
Because we're trying to, I mean, so it will always be a park. Yeah. But the access to a pretty significant park is probably something that we should try to encourage. Right?
So basically
Past
create
alder
access to it, is what you're
person
saying.
from my district always wanted access to that park.
Alderperson Batum to this day is still trying to get a sign for the park
It probably
and
would love to
access.
share.
So, so it makes sense.
So I just want to, special interest areas are areas that either are
that'd be great.
undeveloped, underutilized, misused, or do not have an acceptable transition between different land uses. So we
so
knew that park was always going to be a park, and the narrative that was,
Get to it, that's the point. You
Okay.
can't get to it, so it's underutilized.
okay,
Like
from that
completely
perspective,
isolated
yeah.
there.
So you want, if the narrative that was there didn't make any sense, we could modify the narrative to focus on, we need access to that park.
Yeah, access and utilization of the
Okay.
park.
Proposed, what is actually proposed there wouldn't be a bad start.
I mean, I just don't want to lose track that there's a roadway that's there, and I think that's right of way, or an easement, I can't remember.
No,
And that's a good thing to have,
That line.
you know what I mean? To
Absolutely.
improve utilization and access to a valuable county park that currently is inaccessible now.
Oh, that actually sounds really good.
Every now and then he gets a pearl.
Right?
That was pretty impressive, for sure.
All right. So before I go on, did this conversation, I know I did not go through all 40.
41 looks good, and 10 looks good too.
Yeah, did anyone have any other comments on areas? I know I didn't go through them all, but as you reviewed the plan, omissions or areas you wanted to make sure that we had covered?
So the greatest priorities right now, I think, for the city moving forward for at least the next year and a half or so, are Spring Mall. And that includes from the property line, the Webco property line, all the way to Edgerton along 76th Street and Layton Avenue near Loomis and Layton. To about 38th Street, 37th Street on the west side, or excuse me, north side. The intersection of Loomis and Layton on the northwest side. The entire triangle of the former Stadium Interchange from Cold Spring to the freeway to Loomis. And across the street from there, which I think was in your first shot, which was the old American Soda Water Building and some other, like a bar and some other things. So those would probably be the biggest focuses, Spring Mall. And then the Southridge area is kind of a subcomponent of 76th Street Corridor Plan.
Are we doing anything with 27th Street? Because I noticed, is that going to be a focus? Because I know we've worked on that and we
So
have a
27th Street is
committee.
tough because there isn't, so there is,
Just not working.
but there's, so
I
the,
was
con-
really happy with this guy being here.
It's hodgepodge.
so Target, as you know, has
I
been
know.
purchased by Festival Foods. So
Right.
if you look at 27th Street and you look at the zoning and the comprehensive land use plan, there isn't really much to change. And there's very little vacancy on our side of the street. One of the big problems there was when 94 on an off-ramp to 27th Street didn't go in. That, I think, had some impact there. But the reality is most of the stuff on 27th Street, there's not much to change, except, which I think is a special interest area behind Brager Ford. the Willows area,
Golf,
Yeah.
golf range.
and maybe some of the houses that are
Number 25.
south of it,
Bring Willow back.
Yeah.
the Willows. I have a shirt. You can get the shirt.
Oh.
It says
I
Milwaukee,
used to go
Wisconsin
there
on
all
it.
the time.
It's all
Jeff
right.
fits in with axe throwing.
And if you gave me 12
Yeah.
golf balls,
So
you could get a free
String
game.
Mall,
Nice.
U94 in Loomis,
Yeah,
Layton,
grab them.
Top golf.
Yeah.
Southridge.
Absolutely. Yeah, top golf would be
all the
awesome there.
time.
See, are we doing anything on Forest Home? I'm sorry. So there's another special interest area that's critical that we get in here that I haven't really talked about, but it was reminded by the used car guy
Yeah.
parking. So is there any, can you pull up, I don't know, Google Map or something, I'm sorry. So the area between roughly 43rd Street and 60th, one of those. So Alderperson Borkowski and I, along with the Jackson Park neighborhood, have been talking for years about trying to, it's easier if you see it, but with Alverno College there
Yeah.
and the commerce along that corridor, it's been challenging because there's so many different lots under different ownership. Where the bingo hall is, with the former Dutchland Dairy, the car driving place, the former dental office, and some of the other properties that go west, and
Yeah.
you're all familiar with that?
Yep.
So you see where United Senior Center is there, kind of?
Yep.
So the idea, this is kind of this is like potentially a really cool, charming area in the city that has the draw of Alverno College, the coffee shop stuff, and maybe student housing would probably work well there. So if you kind of zoom in a little bit, right around, so do you see from, I know the Dollar Tree's not ours, and the Knights Popcorn Building's not ours, but the buildings where the United Senior Center, El Quistador, Burger King, Clark, American Family Insurance, all of that stuff. And if you keep going even further to the Automotive Center, the vacant parcel there, George Webb, and if you keep going even further, there's some residential in there, but then you get down to Backyard Automotive down there, see that? And you see, so from roughly Morgan to 43rd Street, and it's not quite 43rd Street or Oklahoma. That area is ripe, I think, to be a special interest area, and I don't know what that means, right? Other than, that's gotta be a focus. And if you even go further down Forest Home, a little more, church. Yeah, so that's Milwaukee, and that's Milwaukee, that's Milwaukee, that's Milwaukee, that's Milwaukee. Right there is where it starts again. Go a little further, I think.
Where are you trying to get to?
Right around in there. There's, well,
We're getting
it's
there.
kind of, like from 76th Street to down to where the boundary is. Do you see where New Star and Liberty Express and there's all sorts of these little businesses in there? If somebody came along and said, I'd like to, do something, that would probably be a good thing.
Yeah,
Oh, that's the right one.
that's the right one.
Yeah.
The final thing, and I'm not sure if this goes in the comprehensive land use plan, just from my perspective, is that right away that you see, that big green thing. I know that's part of the park and recreation long-term land use plan, but I want to make sure that this recognizes how important that connectivity is
Yep.
from east to west.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Potential bike trail.
Bike trail, right?
Because we have a better chance this year for a grant than I think we've ever had, in many ways, thanks to Denise. So,
Yes, the plan addresses that, and I'd love to beef that up as much as we can based on where the negotiations stand right now, because I think that's a pretty
are you
exciting.
doing our park stuff too, or not?
Pardon?
Are you doing our park stuff, or are they farming that to somebody else?
Oh, we are not.
Huh?
We are not doing the park plan.
Okay.
Right.
There's supposed to be one going on, yeah. With park and bikes
Oh,
and
we were
all
just
that stuff.
talking about that, yeah.
You sit on the board, don't you? Aren't you the chair?
I am.
Why don't you know that? What are you doing as the chair?
Let's keep going and stay
Okay,
focused.
sorry.
So, just wanted to provide a very brief overview of the types of changes that have been made to the future land use map since the plan was last adopted in 2008. So this draft plan that you have in front of you incorporates all of the amendments that have already been adopted in recent years before we started the update process, so making sure that we've got all those covered. It also includes all the changes that this body discussed in December and recommended be changed to the map, so we've made those changes as well.
Can I just ask you quick, what's the planned office category? What does that mean? That
So
we-
that's a-
office buildings there or something? And
Exactly, and we're directed by your staff to remove it, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's basically, planned office is incorporated in your planned business category. Yeah, and it was overly prescriptive in a way, so you would have had to change the future land use map if you
Makes
wanted
sense.
to do retail. So we took that out, but we did keep the neighborhood business office, which is a smaller scale category, and that is the category that's used for the forest home areas that we were just looking at, so just something to keep in mind. And then we made all the SIA edits that, some of which I talked about most of the big ones, but also reflecting SIAs as they had developed and making sure those land use categories were accurate. So once again, there's our future land use map. Not exactly easy to read on the screen, but this is the direction that the city's heading for the update. I would like to move on to our targeted sites map. This is something that hopefully caught your attention when you reviewed the plan. This is our intention. Our intention with this map is to update the opportunity analysis map that I showed you at our kickoff meeting. We were working with staff, we worked with all of you. We felt that that opportunity analysis map from the last plan had a lot going on and not a lot of clear direction about what the city should actually do with the map and what the first step was. So we opted to take that in a different direction and came up with this targeted sites map, which identifies some of the key priorities that we see as short-term redevelopment priorities for the city, and kind of gives you a more specific game plan for the next few years. So that map, and I'll show you it in a second, but basically highlights about 4 targeted sites, as we're calling them, but you could perhaps consider this, instead of a targeted site, you could think of it as a priority SIA, because that's functionally what it is. Powerline Trail as a priority of the city is reflected on that map. Spring Mall, Loomis Crossing, and I had the former Target store on there, but I would like to talk to all of you about where we move from here on that one. So here is the targeted sites map. I'm going to pull mine out so I can see it too. So this map includes the targeted sites I just described, but also highlights, it's hard to see on the map, but also highlights your TIF districts, parks, bike trails, and where they connect to other parts of the greater Milwaukee area. Key destinations such as the airport, Alverno College, St. Luke's, and underlying the city boundary is kind of a scaled, faded back version of the future land use plan, so you kind of get a sense of the direction the city's going. And then, as I mentioned, we highlighted some of our targeted sites. So this is, what I'd like to do is tell you what our preliminary recommendations were for each of these sites, and if there's more that you would like us to add or think about, I think this would be a good time to talk about that. Spring Mall, obviously an aging, outdated commercial area that is pretty ripe for redevelopment. This is a site that definitely has higher density potential. There's a lot of paving right now. We envision this, and the city's been envisioning this as a mixed-use redevelopment in the long term, or perhaps shorter term. There is, in our estimation, potential for office here, given quick access to the interstate and high visibility from high-traffic streets.
Mr. Mayor, do you know how much of property is available at Spring Mall for development? I mean, I know you can't build something on a good portion of that land because of water situation.
Because of the water situation? The utility, the what?
I know there's the
Well, the
utility
Spring Mall
substation.
So
East.
the only thing that you can't build on the property that I'm aware of is the Arby's parcel and the Walgreens parcel. Everything else can be built on,
So the total land area is.
can't remember what it is,
It's like 26.
26, 25 acres, 24?
It's at 26 in the box here.
That might
That's
include
right.
Walgreens
It
and,
might.
so Walgreens
I
and
don't
Arby's,
think so. I think it used to be 29, and then
okay,
Walgreens
it's something
got
like 24, like,
26.
Is it, what's the reason that you can't develop those parcels?
so.
Walgreens is its own.
Oh, just because there's existing
It
development
used to be
there.
part of it, and they
Yeah.
split it off, Brixmor sold it off.
I don't know, somewhere way back when, someone said you know, they said, why don't you do Spring Mall to the east?
Because there's houses there, and I think they've always spent, so if you look between the neighborhood to the east, there's a kind of a green belt in between it. And I think historically, that was the buffer to the old mall. Is that what you're saying?
Well, isn't there like an underground creek going through the right-of-way, Wisconsin Electric, right-of-way?
I don't know of any creek there.
Well,
I honestly don't, there may be a creek there. There used to be a
There's been-
railroad that went through there
But there's always
to the north.
water running on that right-of-way.
I think it only runs seasonally and is affected by rainfall and isn't a navigable stream.
But I thought there was someone had a,
No, somebody, I mean, so sometimes people put, they cut
Names or
things
something.
into, but I don't think there's a creek there necessarily. I don't think so. There may be, I don't know.
It would show up on a utility plan.
Engineering has never alluded to any utility issues with that site.
I don't,
Like
think-
that,
because it's-
like a
it's-
constraint.
It's really a marshy area to the, south of the tension lines.
I would call it an occasionally damp area.
Okay. Well, whatever. They
So
will never build.
what happens is most of the site is incredibly impervious, and most of it tilts to the east. So the runoff, for the most part, goes east.
But it's going west.
It may be coming off the neighborhood there, and it may be getting blocked by the parking lot and we'll look at it. I don't
No,
know.
I'm just saying.
can look at the
I walk
elevations.
by there, almost every other day, and it's like, boy. And then someone, a couple of neighbors were telling me, there's like a little creek running underneath there, and I said, well, okay.
I'm not aware of a creek there, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a creek there. I thought most of the drainage flowed to that grassy area that you're talking about, and I know that the neighborhood to the east has wet backyards in some spots by that fence, because the fence would always collapse. There were two fences, but I'm not aware
I
of a
thought
creek.
it extended to the Spring Mall area.
Not aware of a creek there. Honestly, I'm not. Doesn't mean that there isn't one.
So,
So,
obviously, something that would need to be worked out as plans progress for this site. And we can make a note of that too, that there may be environmental issues that,
So what happens if a big grocery store, wholesale club comes along and wants to do that? What impact would this have on that?
what impact would,
So, I mean, I guess it's a special interest area and this would be the better thing to do maybe, but what if somebody else that was really big wanted to come along and
like,
just.
what just happened at the Target site?
Like Target or big grocery store or something.
Hypothetically, yeah.
It's not, Costco won't build in Milwaukee
No.
County.
Well, right now, as the plan is written, the plan mixed-use category is very flexible. And so I wouldn't, that alone wouldn't stop a, lower
It
density.
requires a hearing for a special use.
That would be a zoning question. I think it would depend on what the zoning is right now, right?
You're asking if a big grocery store would,
I'm not saying a grocery store, I'm just saying.
sorry, a
some
big box, a big box.
Target or,
Well, they could go in as it's zoned today.
hmm?
They could go in as it is zoned today.
How about the comprehensive land use plan?
Plan mixed use, but I think that's a really big umbrella. Basically, it would cover any commercial use.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that there is one.
Right.
Fully farmed,
Yeah.
I tried.
Um,
Don't start
I
that.
don't know if it has any merit or anything. The We Energies corridor, I don't see that being the connecting point once you get past 894. I think you'd have to go south as opposed to north.
Gotcha.
I don't know how you're gonna get under the,
No.
I know we have a connection trail there, but
Yeah, we followed
How do you
So I
get
think
across?
yeah, I think you have to go south to Cold Spring. You don't go under there.
yeah.
That was the plan. Remember when Milwaukee Water was gonna run water? They were
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
doing
yeah.
that, and then they would go south to Cold Spring, go
And
under
then
the
down
bridge,
Cold
and then
Spring.
you connect to the Oak Leaf Trail that way. You wouldn't go that way.
Is there a plan, like a plan for this that we should incorporate into or reference more clearly in the comprehensive plan?
Probably.
Could be, I don't know.
Okay.
Park and Rec would
Park
probably.
and
Well, that
Rec
was the
had-
plan I came up
Park and
with,
Rec has a
so.
plan, so, but the way that you have that arrow,
Yeah,
see how you have that?
we wanna go
If you just
south.
flipped it,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
kind of.
Mr.
that-
Mayor, I think the engineering department has a plan.
I was gonna say, I think there is.
There is a plan.
Yeah.
There's no
Because
tunnel
But
there.
they
I
may
feel
not
like
have
somewhat
that-
recently, I had seen one that did have the trail going south.
I would bet $100 that there, well, I've,
Yeah.
100 cents that there is a plan, because we used it as part of our grant application.
Oh, right, so we should get on the same page with,
Probably,
yeah, okay, great, we can make that change.
Does this,
Says engineering.
yeah, does
Great.
this come here and go like that?
Related to that trail, we recognize that that does border the Spring Mall site, so future redevelopments, it'd be a great opportunity to have either trailhead there or numerous connections to the trail so that if folks are living and working on this site, they can get right on the trail. Be a great amenity for the site. Any comments on this one?
It's awesome.
Let's do it. So, Loomis, and I've called this Loomis and 943, but I really should be calling it Loomis Crossing. So we'll make that change in the next plan iteration. A large site that you're all familiar with. We've identified it as a priority of the cities. We'll clean up that land use pattern as we discussed earlier, but basically the idea of having the preservation of the turf skate park, potential for a new competition space, a refreshed skate park that people can come to and use, and then complementary uses that build on that recreation use. So retail, restaurants, things like that that might serve skate park users, potential for hotel if there's tournaments and types of things that people would travel for. There's also space on the site. It's a big site for infill multifamily housing, even office. Again, another site that has high visibility from the interstate.
So the Loomis, that thing that you have circled, when you get to the other side of the interstate where it says TID 5 as well, I mean, that's kind of the same thing, right? So that circle could probably,
Like, you mean,
that circle could probably cross the freeway?
oh, I see what
to
you're
Leyland?
south. Yeah,
That's,
I see what
that's
you're
where
saying.
Christine Helene lives?
yeah,
I'll
you
put a
know,
used car lot,
Forever.
used car lot there? Would that be okay? Can you park some cars in your backyard?
Only storage.
Oh, my gosh.
Only storage.
So that, I mean, that whole thing probably goes down to the
Long as it's not
corner
enclosed.
there,
Okay.
right?
Right.
makes sense.
Including the building on the west?
I think
of,
so, I think so,
Loomis and
I think so,
Layton?
yeah.
I think you'd would.
Okay.
Any comments or additions to this SIA?
I think that's good.
Great.
The point is that all has to be cohesive. And one thing that you put on one side, like in Christine's backyard, something really obnoxious, it has to provide the increment for the good stuff north of the freeway. Okay. You approve of that?
She's good with that.
Only if it's a crematorium.
It's a crematorium, yes, that's, but the, you know what I'm saying? So it's all kind of gotta be blended. Okay.
There's some sarcasm here, right?
No, I was serious, I really want it. No, I'm just kidding. All right, that's cool, awesome.
So we had identified the former Target site as a low-hanging fruit, and apparently we weren't the only ones. So yeah,
The only thing there is, so the city owns a piece of property on the driveway that comes off Layton.
oh,
I don't know if you can't focus in on that, I don't think, but
I can't.
Yeah, that little driveway in between.
there's a little driveway in between, so Layton, and I don't know how this goes in there, but Layton Avenue is being reconstructed in 2021 by Milwaukee County.
Right.
And we probably want to include that city parcel, which is adjacent to that driveway, to connect to this a little bit,
Good idea.
All right,
right?
yes.
Are they gonna be able to turn? Are they doing plans to turn? I mean,
So we kind of went through some gyrations with Milwaukee County because originally 28th Street was supposed to, we wanted to put a stoplight so you could get all the way through to the Kmart lot, right? They were gonna, remember in the old, everybody.
Right.
So, that's, sorry.
So there's a,
So
si-
connectivity to
Con-
Layton,
okay.
enhanced connectivity to Layton
Got it.
is probably what you want to say.
that's helpful. Okay. So, is it the desire of the plan commission to wait until a actual proposal comes before the city to remove this from the map, or should we just go ahead and take it off?
Have we heard anything?
Short-term, this is the short-term target areas.
Yep.
Target not meaning business, but.
I think it's really cool that while we're actually creating the plan,
It's changing.
that we're actually completing some things.
Right.
And I think the other things that are in the plan aren't that far away necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So I would leave it there because I have not heard anything from Festival Foods. Have you? Have you heard anything?
No, they have not called us.
So just, the Business Journal has reported that they've purchased it, but I haven't heard anything.
And everybody is talking about it.
Right,
on,
of
like
course, yeah.
Facebook.
Wow,
you know,
it took
all
them like
the-
4 or 5 years in Hill's Corners to actually do it, but that's not a reason.
Yeah, so I don't know what.
I've been
so I
out of
think it
town,
needs to
so I
stay.
haven't heard what's going on there. What's going on?
Oh,
Festival
Festival
Foods.
Foods.
Oh,
The Target site.
okay, okay,
That's all we know. We
Somebody-
read about it in the paper.
They bought it.
okay.
Maybe they.
It was on the news.
It's, they bought it. It's not
Could've.
It's a decoy.
I think they probably.
It's a
wrote
red
it.
herring.
So, I mean,
never
honest,
know.
you know, the reuse, the appropriate reuse of the existing retail space, I think is probably something that we want to do, right? Along with other options, right?
No politics here.
The internal sidewalk and street grid, just one clear thing is that there was always a concern that folks from Target could get into the middle school, so you might want to, but everybody from the middle school always used to go to Target.
Yeah, that was where I was headed with that, and then I didn't think of the reverse. Yeah, interesting.
I found that out when I
Think
was
about that.
So generic interconnectivity is probably a good thing with the adjacent neighborhoods and institutional uses, but you may not want to get too specific.
That's a good point. Great. Great, so we'll hang on to that for the time being. And so I wanted to prompt the Plan Commission to consider, now we're taking, if we were gonna take Target off, or maybe that's not gonna be a
You
short-term
should leave it on,
focus.
leave it on.
Right, leave it on, but perhaps not seeing that going the direction we think it is in the short term. Do we want to add any other short-term priority areas?
I think north of Sears Auto Center is probably, that's kind of changing now, and I suspect that things will start happening there.
making it larger.
Another concern that I have is that, so there's been a lot of activity with regard to the golf place, the mini golf course.
Oh, like it.
Where's
So, I mean, I'm not sure that it's viable to continue, and this breaks my heart, just like probably every miniature golf course does, right? I'm not sure that it's viable to continue. The price for it is relatively expensive. It's over $1 million, I think. Doesn't mean that's what it'll sell for, but, so probably have to think about what could potentially go there. You could say, well, why doesn't the city buy it? Well, because we don't have $1 million.
Well, development there wouldn't suck and have a tax base, you know?
So I never knew this until you told me last week that it's part of the TIF, it's part of the TIF district. So,
Yes.
I mean, potentially housing or something could go there. Potentially an institutional use with the school could be there. And that would help us with connectivity from the high school to the park, because that's kind of a gap in our trail. We're trying to get there.
This
That
is
could
in
be
the
a
TID
private
4
public
area, is that
trail.
right?
It would probably be a public trail, we'd get an easement for it,
Right.
but it'd be an easement.
Construction
Or we
could
would
be,
own it.
the construction could be private, public.
So I think that's probably an area.
So that might be an area we want to highlight on this.
Well, I think it's something that, because it's for sale, and usually when stuff's for sale, something's gonna happen.
Great.
It may not change, I don't know. So if they want $1 million for it, and even if they sold for $500,000, $500,000 for, how many acres is that? Do you remember how many acres that
I
is?
think you said 5.
So that's 100,000 an acre, that's a lot of money. Which means that you'd have to have
Something,
probably like senior housing or
A lot
something,
of density there.
probably.
but it could be good.
Yeah.
I don't know. There have been a few folks that have looked at that parcel from a residential standpoint. There's also been an institutional user that just kind of wanted to keep it the way it was, or parts of it the way it was. But I'm not sure that that's completely viable in and of itself. Yeah, getting the trail plan, incorporating into this makes a lot more sense probably than having a park plan in and of itself.
That doesn't
Trails
mirror
that
this, yeah.
don't make any sense.
Got to work it from all angles, I think.
Right.
Right. What do you folks think about, I think Sears, we probably have consensus that might be a good one to add.
For which one?
The Sears Auto.
Sears Auto,
Area.
and I think the Greenfield Fashion thing.
But
Yep.
this is like in the next year or two, right?
Yeah,
Target areas.
go
target-
try to
Well,
think about
so from
directing
my
your
per-
efforts.
I mean, just from my perspective though, just remember Sports Authority is vacant,
Yep.
David's Bridal is now vacant. And there's another number of other retailers in there that potentially will not be there. So that whole parcel is, they can't continue to have, that's where I'm coming from. FedEx is vacant. 2 of the 3 houses on 74th Street, I think, are rentals now. So Aurora may be moving out with the new building once its lease is up. So you're trying to think, I mean, the thing that I hope we can try to push a little bit to the extent that we can, and it's even difficult, is to try to reimagine that space a little bit as opposed to parcel by parcel. And I know that's really, really hard to do. But that is a critical area. But if Southridge goes to hell, if Penny's leaves and Macy's leaves at once, with Boston Store already leaving,
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gonna have a pretty dramatic impact on the entire commercial quarter, which to this point is incredibly vibrant. I'm not sure what Greendale's or Simon's plans are for those 3 areas. But I think we have to be able to make sure that we're in place to continue to make sure that the parts of the vibrant commercial trade area are preserved.
I think having a vision or a redevelopment vision for the area, regardless of when change happens, would be a good thing for
I
the
think
city to
it's probably
consider.
pretty important. So we did that like 4 or 5 years ago. We spent,
Right.
you know, before the theater went up and before the apartments went up, was relatively expensive, and almost everything that was in it was pretty much what's in 84 South. And there wasn't much of a reaction from our neighboring community to the south at all.
Yeah,
So can't really,
we're in a loop too.
can't really rely on that. We just kind of have to
Do our own.
do our own.
Communicate, do our own planning.
Sounds good. We also added or posited the idea of Layton at Highway 100 as a potential focus area in the short term. I think that trucking area was mentioned earlier this evening as an area that's likely
The
to
Highlands
change.
is kind of a challenging area. That's where the old budget cinema used to be.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I'd love to make that one that someone is doing something with, but they're not.
We still got the corner too, you got the old, rental place. And then you
Yeah, I
got-
mean, another medium-term one, if the state ever does Highway 100, are all of the businesses between 43 and Layton west of Highway 100, because there would be a significant grade change, which would make many of those businesses inaccessible. Additionally, the trucking terminal, which has a temporary use of parked cars there, and the junkyard that's next to it, I think that's probably an intermediate term, longer term thing to start thinking about.
Do you wanna go to that old hotel? Do you wanna go on the other side of the rock and get up to the hotel?
Get on the other side of the rock and get up to the hotel. What are you talking?
Tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, I mean, so another small special interest area that I just was enlightened with last Friday, was the old Pine Hotel, which is, so that Samori Restaurant is in Hales Corners, but immediately north of that is it 2.7 acres or 5.7 acres? I think it's 2.7 acres.
Next to that,
Where the owner has expressed an interest in potentially doing a professional office building, a nicer use. And I think that there's some strong opportunity now that Highway 100's done
Boy,
to do
it's a
that.
great area.
It's pretty in there.
oh, it's just perfect, easy access, I mean.
Man,
it's a
yeah,
good
for an
location.
office building, that's just,
What about the hospital up there? Whatever happened to that?
Yeah, Kindred is another special interest area, but I don't know what you do with that one, because Kindred closed. It was recently purchased for, I can't remember how much. That's on a, do you remember how much? I don't remember.
Where's that?
Everbright?
Yeah,
Right,
Oh,
the section right,
okay,
right back here.
okay.
okay.
so that's on 130, so that's another area to think about, but I'm pretty sure that use will be consistent with what that use is. I can't imagine that somebody's gonna tear it down.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that's a well-built building. Although Everbright just got a new CFO, CEO. Maybe it'll expand.
Maybe we can get a sign for the turf. That's what I'm hoping for.
Great.
Okay, I don't have any
We'll
other.
move
Do you
along.
guys have anything? Can you think of anything?
Great.
That meeting's still in February?
Open house? Yeah. And that's February 27th here, 6 to 8. I'll talk about that a little bit more. So here's, I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to see the types of recommendations that are included in the plan, in case you didn't get a chance to read the whole thing. So these are just some highlights from Table 4, which is kind of at the end of the main plan document. I didn't really include everything possible in here, but if you do see something that's missing, I'm happy to, we'll write it down, make sure it gets in the table. So this is generally kind of organized by theme, under the topic of redevelopment and reuse planning. Obviously, the city would want to advance redevelopment of those priority SIAs shown on the targeted sites map. That could include preparing master redevelopment plans for some of those sites, working with property owners and adjoining property owners to amass a greater redevelopment site if it was warranted, and evaluate the use of TIF for the right project. Also, the plan recommends that every year or so, you'll have to find what the right timing is for you, but to review and revisit those priority SIAs, keep the momentum going, and then maybe we have to identify the next priority areas. And so that's something that you want to keep doing, not every 10 years, but as often as it makes sense to do so. Related, still under this category, continue to work with the city of Milwaukee on improving the appearance of the 27th Street corridor.
And Forest Home Corridor.
Exactly.
If you could say that, please.
And Forest Home Corridor, prepare TIF plans in support of redevelopment projects as needed. Where appropriate, consider preparing statutory redevelopment plans for key areas in the city. So that would be, that type of plan would enable the city to be more proactive in redevelopment. So if down the road there was a need to acquire property or engage in other activities that would.
Like condemnation?
Pardon?
Like condemnation?
Yeah, that would be one, if you plan to do that, that would be the tool you use, but a lot of communities adopt these just to demonstrate to their citizens that they have intentions of getting involved in cleaning up areas, not necessarily acquiring or condemning property. So it's a tool you have, not a tool you need to use. Just some highlights on ordinances. We understand you are in need of a zoning ordinance rewrite. A few things related to the comp plan include design standards for different land uses such as multifamily and commercial, potential for a 27th Street corridor overlay district, if that makes sense.
In cooperation with the city of Milwaukee.
Exactly.
I mean, I think you need to say that.
Right. Yeah, I think we
It's
do,
important
and
that
I'll
you
make sure we do.
say that in this because we need to say that.
Not a bad thing to say.
No.
It's in the chart.
No, it's a good thing to
She's just
say.
summarizing on a
Do we need
PowerPoint.
to also
Yeah,
include
but-
the other cities at the other end?
Well, and what's the point of
could be
having
a-
it
oh,
if they're not
no.
gonna do their side of it?
Okay, all right.
He likes Milwaukee.
Well, it's so jagged there. I could say New Berlin, but it's 124th, and really, what point is that?
Well, no, I just
No,
know we have.
if
a
you're talking
committee.
like Franklin or Oak Creek
Right,
and
but
stuff,
I
but
don't know if they're included in that.
some
committee that
Milwaukee's
we-
standards are significantly different than ours.
Right.
Which allows other things to happen there that necessarily wouldn't happen here. And there had been a willingness with Alderperson Witkowski previously
Okay,
and some of the planning folks to do an overlay.
okay, understood.
Because what happens is, it's like people in Milwaukee go, Greenfield, people in Greenfield go, well, they can do it over there, why can't we do it here, right? And we had some of that this evening.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, we did.
Case in point.
No, but it's,
So, yeah, I mean, Greenfield is surrounded by more communities than the average community. You guys share borders, as you know, with a lot of different
we
municipalities,
have
so.
7 zip codes, did you know that?
I did not. 7?
No, we
So-
have 0.
And did you know we're not even recognized by the post office as a primary zip code
Zip
in
code.
many of them?
I did not know that.
Including the post office next door that says Greenfield Branch, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's right next door. Go check it out.
He's happy about it.
You're not
I'm not
bitter about
happy
that.
about it.
I hate getting mail with Milwaukee on it, I'll tell you that much.
Off the grid, man. All
It's
right.
nice though when you get postcards from Republican and Democratic senator judicial candidates alike that say, Michael Knightsky, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm the mayor, and it's like, I don't live in Milwaukee, I'm not voting for you because you can't get the damn city right. Or when you try to get a concealed carry permit and one of the drop-down menus doesn't have Greenfield on it.
Or when you get
Or if you go to the
tax.
DMV site, I digress, we've all.
No, it irritates me
We
too.
need to do a show on PBS about our great city.
There we go.
Well, we
She's
can't,
got it.
we don't exist.
Well, they just did one on Oak Creek.
John McGivern.
I
John
mean,
McGivern,
they
yeah.
do it all
He
the
he doesn't
time.
have a green
Anyhow.
one yet?
We're getting there.
Please
I'll
continue.
put that in the
Thank you.
plan. That's
We're
going
not
in the
there
plan.
yet.
Just
We're
a few other
going.
things we might want to include in
Not there yet.
zoning.
Where are we?
Call them.
We're not there yet. Okay.
A few other things we might want to include in the zoning update, not an exhaustive list, but as the city looks to infill, develop, considering smaller lot, single-family zoning districts so that we can have a variety of different residential types in the city. That's just something that might be attainable to a first-time home buyer, for example.
Very good.
That could be
Have a
something.
smaller lot versus like a big lot?
A smaller lot
This
would
is
be more
just like
attainable.
generic stuff because that's what, we don't have any lots.
No, but
Franklin should do this.
yeah,
Right.
or
Have you
higher
suggested it
density
there?
apartment buildings. We're seeing those across the country.
No, the smaller lot sizes for
100 square foot
single-family
apartments.
homes.
Yeah, but it's a single family home, that's why.
You could have a subdivision that might have 6 or 20.
Where are we gonna put a subdivision? Name one spot where we could put a
By the
subdivision,
middle school.
where it has 7 houses?
Yeah,
So
7.
we could put 12 there? Adjacent to 35th Street where we're already having difficulty with the 7 driveways?
All right, we're gonna have back access out of there because they're gonna let us go through.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I think you're stirring the pot there,
But yes,
Carl.
Something to
I think
consider.
we should try that on the west side of town by the
Oh,
Whitman
there
School
you go,
District.
there you go.
Where those single-family lots are that we tried to make more dense so that it would be as intrusive. I think we should do this there.
Put a whole
That would be
subdivision in
less
Willow,
intrusive.
Willow driving
Well, I'd like to see more property owners and renters in the city.
Good luck with that.
Always, but demographics are changing.
So that's
Difficulty
something
is
that,
there
that's,
aren't farm fields to develop. There are only a few places left where there's any major area. And the cost to put in a single-family development outweighs, I mean, no one can do it. No one can afford it. And long-term, single-family neighborhoods are a drain on municipalities in a huge way. And a lot of the municipalities,
Apartment complexes are a bigger drain.
no, they're not.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
You never have to fix the road.
No, they're not.
With
From a
public
utility,
services,
infrastructure, all that stuff.
Using cities' public, all the
I live in an
services.
apartment, man. I never have the cops there. 48 units. Periodically, an ambulance shows up. I'm serious.
Burned down once.
There's no, I mean, there's like no traffic, except in the morning at like 7, when people all go to work, and people come home between 3 and 6, and you never hear or see anybody, except if they're walking to the enclosed dumpster to put their garbage in either the recycling dumpster or the other dumpster through the side door that, seriously.
So you're saying that single-family owner-occupied is
A
more?
lot of the research materials out there say that single families are essentially dead. Now, people can say, well, there isn't enough houses to sell, right? There's plenty of houses to sell, they're just not in, right?
People
They're
are
just not in
buying them and
areas where
renting them.
people would wanna live, and they can't afford them anyways, because the next generation of people, like, you know, younger folks, kinda like you, right? You got a house, but people below you can't afford a house.
They're waiting,
That's why they live with their
Hmm?
parents.
or they wait.
Wait for what?
They wait to buy houses.
It's kinda like It's a Wonderful Life, you know, when Jimmy Stewart says to Mr. Potter, what are they waiting for, right? Well, it's getting to the point you can't afford it anymore,
so
period.
lots of
Think about
tools
it.
to consider.
That's
Just
a
one,
trendy thing to say, but you're right.
is it trendy?
It is.
Okay. Just in natural resources generally, continue to work with MMSD to restore the Honey Creek corridor. Consider,
So we have, how many watersheds? We have 4 or 5?
that's a good question.
We're actually home to all 5 watersheds, I think. So it should be, the Honey Creek corridor is important, but the Root River corridor is important.
What are the other?
Kinnickinnick.
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I think some of those have been,
A little bit.
Name that I never remember.
I think there's another one on the west side too.
Menominee,
That's the Menominee.
Menominee, Kinnickinnick,
I wanna
Creek.
know.
There's 5 of them.
It's up in my Edgerton and 124th.
Oh, the Wildcat.
Wow,
No.
that's a tributary.
Tributary to river.
Oh, yeah, it is Honey Creek.
Something goes into New Berlin up there.
Jackie, we'll
Yeah.
get you a list.
That'd be great. And I think the reason this one was in the plan was that other, like the Root River and a few others had been further along in restoration, and Honey Creek was kind of lower on the list, and so the intent was to elevate. But yeah, definitely. Another thing to consider would be incentives for green building practices, encouraging that within the city.
What kind of incentives would we offer them?
I mean,
There aren't any,
I
just so you
guess,
know.
okay, I'll take your word for it. Tiff?
So probably encourage the use of, as opposed to incentives, because there aren't any.
I mean,
Increases density.
a density bonus,
Density,
With a green roof and an energy efficient design.
or
an energy efficient design as
It's a trade-off.
parking
Increased density
reduction.
anyways, right? Because we follow the zoning code and all that stuff.
So you're saying if you put a green roof on, you'd allow less green space on the ground? Is that your incentive?
Potentially.
or lead.
Yeah.
Building, a green building, if it's a certified green building.
Like a lead or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, this just costs way too much.
That's a trade-off.
The certification costs too
I know,
much.
but what's the,
You just build to the standards, just not have it certified. I mean, that's what, I mean, you have to.
Then why-
okay.
So maybe we're not so hot on that one. We can take that one out.
I want to do that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I think everybody wants to do it, it just doesn't, there's no incentives to do it. pressure from MSD and quality and quantity and all that stuff. But,
And something city could explore is adopting a policy to do that for municipal buildings, as municipal facilities are explored. That's something you do control, so that's something to consider. Green building practices for city-owned properties or city buildings. Finally, updating the landscape ordinance to support stormwater management objectives, support native plantings or plantings that support wildlife and habitat, just to make sure that you've got a range of different options in your landscape code. For our transportation and community facilities, work with WISDOT to modify the park and ride at Loomis Crossing. Idea is that we want to maintain that Loomis frontage for developable uses, and so if there's a need to modify the park and ride, work with WISDOT on that.
that should probably say to incorporate through cost easement agreements with the state of Wisconsin, the park and ride to promote the most possible efficiency or something, right?
The idea being efficiency, is that the,
Something.
yeah, okay.
I mean, just having 300 parking spots there that are
used.
usually 15 to 20% full, as opposed to having 150 spots that there's a cross easement with, right? And they're used often.
Is that, do you think that reducing the footprint of the park and ride would be on the table with WISDOT?
I think you should talk to Christie about that.
Okay. All right. This one we kind of talked about, with working with county and state officials on street improvements to Layton Avenue and 27th Street. Oh, okay. So it's like visual improvements. Prepare a citywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. My suggestion was to do that the next time you update your park plan.
So we're doing that now, and I think we have to, we should incorporate that into this somehow. I think we need to
The park
do,
plan.
I don't know how Scott does that.
As well as them incorporate ours.
Because I have a feeling that there's two hands that aren't,
Talking, yeah.
Well,
two hands.
isn't it the Park and Rec and
Shake?
Gary working together? Because I know Renee, I have Renee working, you know, she gives us updates at our Healthiest Greenfield Coalition meetings, because we have meetings every few weeks, leadership meetings, and she always gives us updates on that plan. And I know she's, and I believe that she
I don't think
works-
that there's been any communication between you and them on the park and trail plan.
Opportunities.
Okay.
I won't bring that up.
I will,
I think,
I will bring that up. And
I think Jeff has probably talked with you with regard to the powered line trail and all that stuff, and including that into this. Maybe not.
I will bring that up at the meeting.
Opportunities.
The wonderful thing is there are no silos in the city, and the staff always talks to each other rigorously, but they've forgotten about the, including trails.
Of course.
Okay.
Last item here is just to continue discussions with WISDOT on future highway reconstruction and improvements. Economic development.
And Milwaukee County, that should say Wisconsin and Milwaukee County.
Yep. I don't think it.
Does 92nd Street, although they haven't finished it yet, and it's an absolute cluster, at some point 92nd Street needs to be reconstructed, as does College from 27th Street, probably all the way to Loomis or 51st. But most of that's in down, so.
Great.
You're talking 90-second full improvement?
At some point,
All right. I'm just asking. I mean, like, you're
'Cause
talking
it's-
10, 15, 20 years.
no, I mean, we are planning, right? That's,
Although it might happen quicker if they ever do the interchange at, the Hale interchange.
yes, it
That
probably,
might be funded then through that.
which was supposed to be
Would be
starting
already
soon,
now, yeah.
Most of it
but
was
it
supposed to
wasn't
happen
because all the money
already.
went to Drexel. So, all right.
Because Highway 100
right.
will be done before the Hale.
Economic development, initiate a city marketing campaign to attract the types of uses that you want to see. Probably should have said on that point, you know, working with your economic development partners such as the chamber. I think that would be a good opportunity to collaborate on that. Plan also recommend.
Bring that up at the chamber meeting? Okay, or Andrew. All right, thank you.
Marketing. you could consider expanding the authority of the Community Development Authority to market sites in Greenfield. So right now, I think they pretty much convene to approve TIF right now, but
We
there's
probably
more
don't
they
need
could
that.
be doing. Pardon?
We probably don't need that one.
Okay.
They have a lot of authority, they just don't use it.
Once a year, or maybe once every 2 or 3 years. And the marketing of sites is an active, ongoing process among brokers and folks that are within the city already.
Yeah, I think if they were to take this on, they would absolutely need to meet more than they do now.
It doesn't,
Historically, the CDA has been very,
so the way that it really works is all the brokers know exactly what's for sale, what's in play, they're all on the ground. And Christy and Andrew and I and alderpersons, we make strong suggestions and reach out to developers and all the time with regard to opportunities, generally. We can create RFPs for all these things, but they're kind of like creating things that never happen. But we can, I don't care.
Sounds like you guys have it covered in other ways.
I mean, one of the biggest activities the CDA did is when we did the private activity bonds for the Laurier Group.
Generally speaking, and TIFs, right?
And
TIFs,
TIF, yes.
yeah.
Yep, we did that.
So be designated committee, you're saying, which is not.
It's more ad hoc.
The CDA? The CDA exists, but it has limited roles. It did B-bonds once, right?
It's more ad hoc, and that's what it was in the past.
It's ad hoc, which is what it was intended for, and
Yep.
it meets
And it
to
worked.
discuss. It does. I mean,
it's not out purchasing property and reselling it, that's for darn sure.
Yeah, there's no budget for that.
So for housing, some of these recommendations came about in conversations with staff related to the housing affordability report that we prepared for the city. So we included some suggestions for how to provide housing at both attainable and affordable price points. So the idea is affordable might be something that perhaps is tax credits, perhaps not. Attainable is something that recognizing that cost of construction is really high, the barrier to entry is very high for new housing for a lot of people, so finding housing that's attainable to the average person may not be a tax credit project per se. A few ideas for the city to consider or recommendations in the plan include utilizing, there's now special rules for TIF, that you can keep the TIF district open a year longer and utilize the increment in that year to support affordable housing throughout the city. I understand that there's actually a bill in front of the legislature right now to actually make this power a little bit more robust. I think the idea is that you would be able to keep it open for more than 1 year. So this is a pretty powerful tool that you have. Again, promoting smaller lot single family options, consider density bonuses to create density in strategic locations, and consider reducing or waiving parking requirements for multifamily. This would be something that you would do in areas where there's transit available and maybe smaller apartments are in that project, so there's less need for example, 2 parking spaces per unit. Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, intergovernmental, I think that was the theme of tonight, just working with our neighboring, overlapping and neighboring jurisdictions. Plan says to work with Greendale on a repositioning plan for Southridge Mall and 76th Street corridor. Negotiate with West Allis about relocating their public works facility. I understand that may be happening sooner rather than later. And as we've discussed, coordinate with We Energies County and adjacent communities on the power line trail and making that happen. So next steps for the plan. So we are kind of through the main drafting phase, and we're moving into the public review of the plan, the open house, as we mentioned before, February 27th here. So please let your friends, family, and neighbors know about it. This is the big public input opportunity we have for the plan before we go to public hearing. If anyone asks, it's a 2-hour event. The format basically being that I'll do a quick presentation providing an overview of what's in the comprehensive plan around 6:15, so not long after the event starts, and then after that, we'll move into kind of an informal open house format. So if you know folks that want to get the presentation, tell them to come right on time. All right, so last slide, I think. Next steps, following the open house, we will take the comments that we heard tonight and the comments we heard at the open house to prepare the final draft or draft 2 of the plan. That needs to happen before March 19th. My hope is to get it done before then. From there, we go into the 30-day review period, which is required by state statutes. That gives neighboring jurisdictions, the members of the public, the opportunity to review the plan before the public hearing. Public hearing is slated for April 21st. Our recommendation is to make the public hearing a joint meeting. I don't know if I talked about this at our kickoff, but state statutes require that the council actually holds the public hearing, which we think kind of robs the Plan Commission the chance of hearing the public testimony at the public hearing before they recommend the plan. So our recommendation is to hold a joint public hearing that gives everybody the opportunity to hear what the public has to say. And then immediately following the public hearing, the Plan Commission can determine if changes are needed or not, and then vote to recommend the plan to the council. Following that vote, the council has the opportunity to vote to adopt the plan that night.
Awesome.
That's the plan. So we hope to do it that way. We've had a lot of success with this approach. And then after the plan's adopted, we will assist the city with the required notifications that the state has you do when you adopt your 10-year update. And that is all. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you guys have anything that you wanted, anything else to add that you can think of? Anything else that you think is important?
No, I mean, she just, the West Dallas recycling site, because we have the Foundry Sands land, properties over there. I was just, if we get that relocated, then you have opportunities there.
It's got tougher than it's just been
Oh, I know, it's
expressed
been
because it's not even our city.
I know. And it's been on the table for 20 years.
Yeah.
that
I don't think
conversation.
anything's gonna change there
No,
either.
nor do
just so
I.
you know.
Well,
And the county took it over, so now they're stuck with it, kind of.
yeah, then they're getting yelled at and shit.
Yep.
So it's gonna be worse.
It's
Okay.
been that way for
Thank you very much.
as long as I've been around here.
Just a quick question with regards to, what you said, Layton Avenue is gonna be done starting 27th
27th to Loomis.
27th and, Layton
27th, Layton Avenue, from 27th to Loomis.
Avenue to Loomis, and that's in 2021.
And it's scheduled by Milwaukee County to begin in 2021. They've already started doing some work with surveying. You might see surveying in earnest this year.
Okay.
They did some last year on it as well.
that's good.
So that's well
Okay.
done. So Layton, just so you know, Layton Avenue was constructed in 1955 and it has not been reconstructed or resurfaced until they did some highway work and the state came through and just threw asphalt on it because it was so rough.
Okay,
Okay?
all right.
That's a complete reconstruction with sidewalks
Wow.
and all that stuff, lighting down
And with sidewalks.
with sidewalks.
Fantastic.
Parking
Which
lane?
is nice
And
because of the
parking
middle
lane,
school
I
week.
think there's a parking lane, but that may be a bike lane, depending on what the federal standards are now. I haven't seen the engineered drawings.
How
And there would be
much wider is
lighting through the median. What?
How much wider are they making? Because they have the median there, but you also.
It
there's
will,
land
it will
access.
match what Layton Avenue looks like west of Loomis.
Really?
Okay.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
It'll be- Well, if you take the gravel, it's the same. Just, I mean, if
What's
you-
up next? The motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn at 8:24.
So moved.
Second.
Weiss, second by Helene, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed at 8:24. We are now off the record, or off the meeting. It's done.